We're not going to do the video. We're just going to begin. And if you could start recording right now, if you want to. Okay. Okay, great. I'd like to welcome everybody to New York's first Mayoral Forum. And we're honored to have the honor of doing this tonight. And we're going to start the program. Before I make the introductions as to the process for tonight and who we are, I'm going to introduce our Speaker of the City Council, our friend who's a charter member of the Jim Howell's Liberal Democratic Club, someone who, had he stayed in the race for mayor, would have had so much to contribute to the dialogue and debate. And that's our good friend, progressive leader of the City Council, Corey Johnson. Corey?
Thank you, Alan. I want to welcome everyone tonight to this first mayoral forum for the 2021 campaign and race for mayor. As Alan said, I'm Corey Johnson, Speaker of the New York City Council. And Alan, pay attention one moment because I want to speak about Alan. This club, the Jim Howell's Liberal Democratic Club, and I'm sure Alan will talk about it in a moment, is named for Jim Howells, who was a legendary figure in the LGBT struggle for equality in New York City. He was someone who ran for political office. Alan will correct me if I get this wrong, but I think he was the first openly LGBT candidate to run for the New York City Council in the history of New York City. And I really want to take a moment to thank Alan, because Alan was one of the co-authors of the nation's first gay rights bill. He is a progressive, trailblazing leader in our city. He is a dear friend. Alan, I love you. Thank you for everything you do for our city. Thank you for your progressive leadership. I'm grateful that you and I have known each other and been friends for 20 years. And I remember this club, this wonderful club, being started in your living room on Jane Street when you used to live there, those first meetings. And now you're hosting the first forum, mayoral forum for 2021. So I'm not going to speak long. I know that the first person we're going to hear from, who Alan will introduce in a few moments, is someone who I've gotten to work with over the years, Catherine Garcia, former sanitation commissioner in New York City, worked at the Department for Environmental Protection before that. But before we hear from Catherine, I just want to give some opening greetings and thank you all for being here. My hope is that tonight's forum is going to be an opportunity for the candidates who are declared and running for mayor, for them to discuss some of the biggest issues that our city faces, whether it's how we deal with a tragic record number of homeless New Yorkers and children across New York City, the housing crisis that our city faces right now, the long road towards recovery coming out of this economic collapse from COVID-19 striking us and the city being the epicenter of coronavirus earlier this year, what candidates are going to do to make sure that our school system and that the 1.1 million children in New York City get the best education, their thoughts on mass transit and transportation, their plans on how to combat climate change and how to create green jobs in New York City, how to manage city agencies to make sure they work for New Yorkers and neighborhoods across our city, what they plan on doing to make sure that we are an anti-racist city, that we're a city that actually has a place where people can be safe, but where communities are not overpoliced. So those are some of the issues that I look forward to hearing about tonight from all the candidates that are running for mayor. It's said that every election is the most important election of our lifetimes. And I know that 3 weeks from this very moment, we will be hoping that we defeat our racist criminal president and send him packing. And hopefully we get a Democratic Senate and expand our majority in the House. But as soon as this election is over in 3 weeks, I know that many New Yorkers are going to immediately turn towards the Democratic primary in June of 2021. And even though I am no longer a candidate for mayor, I am paying deep interest to this race. I'm proud of the work that the council has done over the last almost 3 years, but especially over the last 7 months since COVID-19 hit our city. And many of the issues that are going to be talked about tonight from the 6 candidates that you're going to hear from are issues that the council wants to work on and is going to work on over the next 14 months while we are still in office. But we want to hear the vision of the candidates that are running for mayor. So with that, I again want to thank you, Alan. Alan, thank you for hosting this tonight. Thank you for your leadership and track record, your friendship, how you were on the cutting edge of all these issues that we're talking about. Your speaking at the march in August with Black Lives Matter, everything that you do. So I want to thank you. And I want to just say, I look forward to hearing from all the candidates tonight. I know we're going to hear from Catherine Garcia first, and then I don't know the order, but we're going to hear from Sean Donovan, Maya Wiley, Scott Stringer, Eric Adams, and Diane Morales. And so I look forward to this conversation, and I'm grateful, Alan, that you asked me to make some opening remarks tonight. So with that, I turn it over to you, the president of the Jim Alzheimer Democratic Club. And before I do that, I also want to recognize Louis Cholden Brown, who works at the council, who is a state committee member on the west side of Manhattan, who is an integral part of this club. I believe he's a director of political action. And I know that Jeff Harant is on as well, who is producing tonight's event and has worked really hard on this. So to the three of you, I want to say thank you. And I look forward to watching tonight's forum. Thank you very much, Alan. You're the best. I love you.
Thank you very much, Corey. And you heard it here first. Corey has not disappeared, and Corey will be running for office in the near future. And we need Corey in politics, in elective office. We need his guidance and his courage and his energy. And we need him to speak for the LGBT community and all the other disenfranchised. So I love to you, Corey. Thank you for being such a great member of Jim Owls. I'm going to be very, very brief. Yes, Jim Owls was the first candidate, first openly gay candidate in New York to run for any office. And he was the founding president of the Gay Activists Alliance. And we named the club in his memory because we want to have the same energy that the Gay Activists Alliance had in the early 70s. We're proud that we were liberals back then, and we want to keep in step with the energy of the 60s. We have a 100-person board, and we have our officers, and we encourage you to go onto our website and see exactly who we are. We have many activists from all different communities, a lot of elected officials, a lot of people in the performing arts, and we're very proud of the people who work with us and the people that put our events together. And yes, Jeff Harant is our Zoom master, and Louis Cholden Brown is sitting right next to me. Without Louis, we wouldn't have a political genius at the realm. I want to say that tonight's event, we do have 7 of the candidates running. Carlos Menchaca will be joining us. He will be the last candidate. Carlos made his intentions known within the last 48 hours, and we invited him, and of course he said yes. We, on the campaign finance website, if you go on, there are about 16 people who have expressed interest in running for mayor. We could not and would not invite all 16. Most of them won't wind up running. Most of them, we don't know who they are. And we invited those who we considered most relevant and to the left of center. Jim Owls believes that the candidates that we consider should believe in the progressive democratic principles that are out there, that we believe in. Do we have litmus tests? Yes. If you're not pro-choice, you're not going to get an invitation to go on. If you don't think gay people should have the right to marry or to have children, you're not going to be on as one of our candidates. If you believe that people shouldn't have the right to protest and go into the streets without having to register as individuals to participate, you're not going to be invited to be on our screening. To us, the right to choice, LGBTQ rights, and the First Amendment is sacrosanct. And the gay rights movement was founded in the streets through our protests, our demonstrations, and our marches. And right now, we are also in the days of the greatest marches and the greatest civil rights demonstrations in the history of the United States. And we will do nothing to stifle people's voices of protest. People should not have to register with the government. People should be free to go out into the streets and be the voice of protest in order to achieve change. So we made the determination that we will have the 7 candidates. It's a field of diversity. And we will be giving each candidate 1/2 hour. We will start with a brief introduction of 2 minutes by each candidate as they appear. Then we have 14 questions in which you ask for a yes or no. And then we will go on to questions which require somewhat of a more substantive response, which we're going to try to keep the responses to 2 minutes. One of the things that we requested of all 7 candidates is to sign on a letter to the governor requesting that he release all the elderly, with the exceptions of those who shouldn't be released because they're a danger to society. But basically, in this pandemic, and the jails being the most dangerous place for people to exist during this pandemic, that people over 50 years old be released in this emergency time. We asked all the candidates who ran for district attorney, all 9 candidates, to sign the exact same letter, and 8 of the candidates agreed to sign it. Tonight, we asked all 7 candidates to sign it, and 6 of the 7 candidates agreed. Eric Adams, Sean Donovan, Diane Morales, Scott Stringer, Maya Riley, and Carlos Menchaca agreed to sign on to the letter. We're very proud of that. Unfortunately, Catherine, you could address this. You chose not to sign on. We encourage everybody who's on tonight, and we have over 1,200 people who registered, to please contact the governor's office and allow the seniors out. We don't want them dying in their cages, in their cells. Okay, now we're going to begin. I want to say our questions are fair. We ask these questions to find out who the candidates are.
Alan, may I just say one
yes,
quick,
Corey.
I apologize for interjecting. I just want to be clear. I didn't know that Councilmember Carlos Menchaca, my colleague in the council, was joining tonight. So I didn't want anyone to think that I was overlooking him. I just didn't know until you announced that. I was reading off of the flyer. So I'm glad that Carlos is joining as well. But I didn't know, which is why I didn't mention him at the end of my remarks. And I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to make that clear.
No problem. Thank you very much, Corey. Our question, we try to keep our questions fair. Some of them are tough. We're not doing tonight to make friends. We're doing tonight to educate people and for people to learn about the candidates. Enough for me. Now turning the floor over to Catherine Garcia, 2 minutes, and then we're going to go into our lightning round. Welcome, Catherine.
Hello. Thank you, Alan. I'm Catherine Garcia, and I really appreciate you having me. It's truly an honor. And Corey, we do miss you in the race, and I look forward to a time when we can all do this in person when it's safe. If my name is familiar to you, it is because I have been in leadership positions in New York City government for my entire career. I have been the person to call when there's a crisis, which is why I was named food czar during this pandemic and distributed 130 million meals to vulnerable New Yorkers. It is why I served as the interim chair of NYCHA and lead czar, stepping in to overcome decades of disinvestment in public housing, years of neglect in childhood lead exposure. On my watch, the number of children with elevated blood lead levels dropped by more than 20%. I served as Chief Operating Officer at the Department of Environmental Protection, under Mayor Bloomberg, where I was responsible for delivering clean water to your door. When you got up and brushed your teeth, that was a lot of folks at DEP making sure that happened. Until recently, I was the Commissioner of Sanitation, the largest in the world, and not insignificantly 98% male. But I resigned that post because I saw firsthand a mayor who was unprepared to deal with this crisis, who responds to headlines, and who made budget cuts that hurt our city, its people, and its very foundations. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, raised on its streets, educated in its public schools. It's where I chose to raise my family. And I couldn't sit idly by when I care so much about this city. That is why I'm contemplating running to be your mayor. We need an experienced hand on the wheel. And the fact is, you won't find a candidate with more executive and crisis management experience than I have. It's a cliche, but it's true. With crisis comes opportunity. It is time for bold ideas to build the right foundation for our city for the next 100 years. More than anything, it is time to get to work. Nothing is affordable if you have no income. We must support job growth, build affordable housing, and bring city services into the 21st century. And that can be anything from applying for benefits to getting a permit. There should be nothing you can't do on a smartphone. We'll bring accountability and reform to the NYPD and actually fire the bad actors, just like I did at sanitation, while at the same time giving our good officers the respect they deserve. And we'll fight climate change and start by turning Rikers into a composting and renewable energy zone, bringing back food waste collection, electrifying our fleet, and modernizing our buildings. We are the food, fashion, finance, cultural, tech capital of the world. And it's time for us to be the most eco-friendly city in the world too. It is time to get to work. Together we can build the right foundation for our city for the next 100 years.
Okay, thank you. I just got a text from Eric Adams people. I'm not sure that I mentioned that Eric Adams, former police officer, signed the letter about clemency to the governor. Okay, now we're going to go to questions. One, will you not seek and if offered, refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
I am not seeking the endorsement of Bill de Blasio and I will not accept it.
Okay, thank you. These are yes or no. Second question has 3 parts. Will you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
No.
Should the NYPD Commissioner require confirmation by the City Council?
No, they should be accountable to the mayor.
Okay, number 3, would you not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
I would not interfere in the council process.
4, are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
No.
Okay. Are you will you favor the renaming of the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
I have not thought about the Koch Bridge at all. I like Ed Koch, so I'm going to say I don't have an answer for you for that one tonight.
Okay. Are you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson?
Yes.
Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work, and do you oppose the Nordic model?
I believe in the Nordic model.
Okay. Do you oppose the de Blasio-Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon headquarters to Long Island City?
I oppose tax breaks, but I support growth.
So the answer is yes or no?
I would have done the Amazon deal because of the jobs involved.
Okay, so you didn't oppose it then. Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Yes.
Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs or cats?
I particularly the dogs, as long as they're not causing a problem for other neighbors,
Okay.
i.e. that they are threatening to other neighbors.
Okay. will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the city administration?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to be posting all the answers on our website. Do you support the removal of nearly 300 homeless people from the Lucerne Hotel due to pressure from the local residents not wanting the homeless in their community?
Everyone has to have some homeless in their community. That's where they're from. But I think using hotels is problematic on many levels, both for those who are homeless as well as for their neighbors.
So do you support the removal of the 300 from the hotel?
I would not have put them in the hotel in the first place.
Okay. Do you support the removal of the 300 who are there?
I support the removal unless things are significantly different in that area in terms of giving those folks who are homeless services.
Okay, thank you. Will you refuse contribution?
About that is that the Upper West Side has done great work over the years. Goddard Riverside has done great work with the homeless over the years. I do not understand why we were not using that model.
Okay. Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry and all law enforcement unions or associations?
No, everyone needs to be at the table. Real estate's got skin in the game. And many of the real estate owners in this city are small real estate owners. And I want to make sure we're using all of our creativity to bring back the city of New York.
Okay, and the last question, do you occasionally smoke weed?
I don't.
Okay, we should take care of that in the future. Okay, now we're going to go to individual.
In the past, when I have, it made me incredibly hungry, and I try not to eat junk food.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you were the food czar earlier during the pandemic and supervised a program that delivered what food? Can you describe that program in more words?
Absolutely. So I got charged in mid-March with ensuring that no New Yorker go hungry. And so the program was really in three parts. One was using our schools to distribute food, and that was for anyone who was hungry. So there were 3 meals a day provided. You could come get it whether or not you were homeless, whether or not you were undocumented, whether or not you had children. That was one piece of the program. And I have to give a huge shout out to the school food folks who came in every single day to make sure that program worked. The second piece was home delivery, because many people, particularly in April and May, could not leave their homes because they were newly vulnerable to COVID or they were sick. And so that involved having us deliver large packages of food to distribution sites and using TLC drivers to deliver them. At a certain point in late May, we were delivering 1 million meals a day through that program. And then the third real piece of it was shoring up the food pantry, which we did in partnership with the city council, pushing out additional funding to them as well as additional food to make sure they could serve their communities. And also doing pop-ups. When you look at the geography of the city, there are neighborhoods that have really strong food banks. And then there are neighborhoods that have very little. And so we tried to make sure that we were filling in those blanks. I'm extremely proud of that team that we put together, somewhat in lightning speed.
Okay, we have to
make sure that went forward.
Wrap it up, please. Thank you. You in your on your website, and you've been quoted as calling yourself progressive and practical. Are you insinuating that progressives are not practical?
I'm not insinuating anything, but I'm about getting things done. I'm about making sure that we take those progressive policies and actually get them implemented. One of the things I'm most proud of is getting in place the zone legislation for commercial carting, which meant we had private carters, labor, environmental activists, business community, real estate, all at the table. And I would say we came up with very good legislation at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Also, in your material, You have said that you would like to be an Ed Koch-like mayor. How can you propose to model yourself after a man whose abject neglect of the AIDS crisis in the early years allowed HIV to spread out of control and evolve into a nationwide and worldwide pandemic? A man who supported the death penalty and a man who was notoriously racial divisive and who called Congressman Ron Dellums a Zulu warrior and a Watusi from Berkeley. Can you choose a different role model?
I have many role models. What I was speaking to in that particular instance was that I appreciated two things about Ed Koch. One is that he always wanted to hear feedback from the public. How am I doing? That he was also very instrumental at bringing us back from the brink of a fiscal crisis, and really starting to rebuild and putting together the first affordable housing plan. So I don't embrace all of his policies, but there are parts of him that I recall that I think are very important. But there's also other Democrats that I very much admire, whether or not that's Elizabeth Warren or, of course, goodness gracious, we all must go vote for Joe Biden starting next week with early voting, make a plan. I think there's a lot to look at across the spectrum of how we really going to govern this city.
How do you propose to save small businesses which have suffered incredibly during this pandemic?
I think we need to bring small businesses to the table and talk to them. But one of the things I want to make sure we have in place is a commercial vacancy tax, because I think that will drive an incentive for landlords to work with their small businesses who are really struggling. And I will advocate at the federal level to make sure that we have more funding to provide them with the investment income they need to keep those businesses going.
Okay, two more questions. One, do you believe that individuals who want to protest should first have to, as individuals, register with the government?
No.
Okay,
you need to have a right to protest, and that sounds like surveillance to me. So
okay.
I would be opposed to that.
Okay, what plans would you have to save nightlife in the city of New York? Restaurants and nightlife are suffering also greatly.
All of the culturals are suffering greatly, and I think we need to have a plan in place now that is able to deal with the fact that it will get better, and it will get better in stages, and we can start to think about how you can begin to open things up. I also would work closely with nightlife around how they can have better community relations with all of their residents, which I know is a constant challenge. But I think really it's about having a plan in place to make sure that nightlife can begin to come back in stages.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to move on. We will be in contact with you. We thank you very much for you being with us tonight.
It's a pleasure, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, Jeff? Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have our next candidate, Eric Adams.
Nope, he's not logged in yet.
Okay, we're going to try to locate him. Do you want to show our little video? So I'll have 90 seconds to locate him.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Don't cry for me, White House staffers. The truth is I will infect you. All through my tweeting, my mad existence, I broke my promise, won't keep my distance. I I always say too much. Never mind the thousands of lies I have told to you. As for wearing masks and acting sane, that is nothing that I will ever do. So don't cry for me, Secret Service. Though COVID might just well kill you. While on my joyride, I spread the virus. I broke my promise, won't keep my distance.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Jeff?
Sir,
Okay, we've located Eric. Is he on?
can start speaking if he is.
They tell me he's on. Is he not on?
I don't see him as,
Hey, you should be on.
let me call him.
I'm talking to his manager.
Okay.
He's logging on now.
Who's after Eric?
Sean Donovan. If
Okay,
you want to.
I can check in with him after we get going with Eric.
He's on.
Oh, where is it?
I made him a panelist. It's fine. He's coming
Okay. How do you know he's coming?
because I set it up.
Okay.
He joined. There he is.
Okay, Eric is now on. Eric, could you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Jeff, can you make sure that the future people come on 10 minutes prior to their assigned time? Okay, we welcome you.
Thank you.
Would like to give you a few moments to introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for mayor.
Okay, am I on now?
You're on now.
Thank you so much, and thanks this amazing club. Let me just get my video off and turn on my video. There you are. Notice my colors are celebratory. You know, I want to thank you so much, this club, and I just really want to appreciate the club and thank you for the opportunity to come and be a part of this. And your leader. Every time I see Alan's phone number come up on my phone, I remember our days of fighting for marriage equality in the state Senate and how we were able to move that important bill forward. And your club mission of guaranteeing basic human rights and dignity and freedom for all has never been more important than now. And so as we get down to this important conversation, I just want to tell you, I live in the city and I lived in the city all my life. And just like this club and the people of the city, I love the people who are part of this great city. And it has not always been easy. I think of the days of growing up in South Jamaica, Queens, where my siblings and me used to carry a garbage bag full of clothing to school every day out of fear that when we come home, the marshal was going to move us out of our home. And my mother didn't want us to be humiliated or embarrassed. I spent my entire life helping people who are living that life now. My 42 years of service as an activist, a cop, as a public servant, an elected official, has been committed to helping these same people. Too many things don't work for far too many people in this city who need government. And I do not have to tell you about the challenges we are facing now: crime, enormous deficit, health crisis. All of these issues have led people to surrender and believe the city is dead. Some have actually decided to leave the city. To me, it's deja vu. We were here before. During the 80s and 90s and early times, I was part of a small group of law enforcement officers who started to use real technology to fight crime in a real way. We went from having 2,000 homicides a year, 98,000 robberies, every car having a no radio sign in it. We came together and was able to turn around this city from a police department that was dysfunctional to functional. I believe that was a pivotal period for this entire city. If every agency in this city would have changed how they were managing the problems of this city, I think we would be living in a different city right now. Instead, we continue to operate our agencies in silos that work against each other and the city. In fact, I say it over and over again, our city is dysfunctional. Most of the problems we are facing are self-inflicted. And these problems existed long before COVID-19. We run this city in the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. Perfect example of that. I'm sorry?
We have to keep it short. We're going to go to questions.
Okay, I just want to sum up. A perfect example of that is how what we're doing in our law enforcement entities, where we are feeding a criminal justice problem because of the lack of education. That is one of the biggest crimes that I see in this city. So I want to open the floor and enjoy your questions so that you can learn better of what my vision will be for the city of New York. Again, thank you for allowing me to speak.
So thank you very much, Eric. We're going to go to the yes or no questions, starting with will you not seek, and if offered, refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
Would I not seek or offer, I'm sorry,
Would
say
you
that again?
not seek, and if offered, would you refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
I would not commit to that, no.
Okay. Will you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
I will have a new commissioner when I come in.
Okay. So the answer is yes. Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Yes, it should.
Thank you. Should the NYPD Commissioner require a confirmation by the City Council?
I believe that's important, yes.
Great. Will you pledge to not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
Yes.
Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
No, I'm not.
Will you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and its blatant racism?
Yes, I am.
Are you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson?
Yes, I am.
Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work, and do you oppose the Nordic model?
No, I'm not in favor of decriminalizing it.
And what about the Nordic model?
I don't believe that's a good model. I want to be clear, just in case I wasn't. I don't believe in decriminalization of it. I don't.
Okay.
And I don't believe the Nordic model is the right way.
Okay, do you oppose the de Blasio Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon's HQ2 to Long Island City?
I oppose the way they did it.
Okay. Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Yes, I do support it.
Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs or cats?
Yes, of course. Who doesn't like dogs?
Well, I agree. Will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the administration?
Yes, I hired them already, and I believe strongly in that. I was formerly incarcerated, so I know it.
Do you support the removal of nearly 300 homeless people from the Lucerne Hotel due to pressure from local residents who don't want the homeless living nearby?
I don't support that.
Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry and all law enforcement unions or associations?
First of all, I'm surprised you put them together. I won't take it from the Unions Association, but I will take it from real estate. I own a small property, so I am real estate also.
So you take from real estate, but not from law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, we'll separate these in the future. Last question is, do you occasionally smoke weed?
Occasionally. Let me be careful of that. I didn't inhale.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go to questions for individual candidates and some in which we will be asking everybody. You've come out, hold on one second. You've come, 1 minute. After the Tree of Life shooting, you called for citizens to arm themselves. Given the pandemic of gun violence in our city, how do you defend that statement? And do you really believe that people should have the right to carry guns into houses of worship?
I'm always amazed when truth no longer matters anywhere. I've never called for that. Let me be very clear what I call for. I go to church. I go to church every Sunday, and many of my trained law enforcement personnel, retired or active, are in churches every day. I met with a group of pastors and we trained those parishioners where to sit in churches, mosques, and synagogues. I said, train law enforcement officers, not citizens, not permit carriers, train law enforcement officers who are active or retired, coordinate with their pastors, with their imams, with their rabbis, and figure out how to sit in strategic locations in the houses of worship so that people who are praying are not preyed upon. This is not for anyone but those who have went through the required training to be a law enforcement officer.
Okay, thank you. Being borough president of Brooklyn, what is your plan to control the outbreak of COVID-19 in areas where the ultra-Orthodox have created a crisis?
Doing exactly what I have done from the day that I moved into Borough Hall when the COVID-19 hit this city. Get on the ground. We unfairly communicated to a diverse city as though everyone in New York spoke one language and watched the evening news. That was not the reality. In the borough of Brooklyn, 47% of the people speak a language other than English at home. And we need to communicate in a diverse language that people are speaking and understand the cultural norms on how people are speaking information. One, I will have the police department look in every community to identify where there are large numbers of non-compliance and report it to a rapid mobilization civilian team, not the police. I don't believe in heavy-handed policing. Second, we would get on the ground, get PPEs, information in a language that people are speaking, and those who are egregious and violating the rules, they will be fined or summoned in some way to take corrective actions. But we have a reactive plan and not a proactive plan, and that's a big mistake, and we can turn this around by doing so and empowering and deputizing credible messengers in communities to deal with the problem. We have failed to do that.
Okay, thank you. How would you define affordable housing?
On income bands, we need low income, middle income, families as well. 40% of New Yorkers have a sufficiency deficit according to the United Way. And oftentimes people don't realize the accountant and the teacher, they're struggling as well. And I will ensure that we have various income levels so that we can get low income and get middle income. You take a food service employees in McDonald's, if both of them are working full time at $15 an hour, we have now made it impossible for even that low income to find affordable housing because we feel they make too much. So we must make sure we have low income and middle income to ensure that we do not break middle class New Yorkers.
Okay, the issue of demonstrations and resistance and marches. Do you believe that individual people should have to individually register in order to participate in a demonstration?
Absolutely not. You have the right and authority to demonstrate and to march and participate in a peaceful way of voicing your concern. What I would never support, those who are anarchists that comes from outside our city and attempt to firebomb police vehicles and properties and destroy communities. I would never support writing F the police on buildings or destroying, attacking people because they disagree with each other, as we saw some of the demonstrators in Borough Park in the last few days. I believe in public safety. That's the prerequisite to prosperity, and you can voice your concerns without being violent in the process.
Excellent, thank you. You've been a strong advocate of the nightlife industry. If you were mayor, what policies would you enact to save the industry, keeping in mind that many community boards just don't want nightlife in the neighborhoods?
I'm a big believer in nightlife, and anyone that states restaurants and nightlife are there for the rich, they need to see my history of being a dishwasher in a nightlife establishment and the countless number of people that are employed. I will have a real nightlife mayor, nightlife czar, where we would show the nightlife representatives on what are the right things to keep their establishment open. Listen, we're a 24-hour city. That's what makes us great. People come to New York not because they want to see Department of Sanitation trucks. They come here because they want to enjoy the beauty of having a very vibrant nightlife. I'm a supporter, always have been. I started the association BAR here in the borough of Brooklyn, and I was talking about how do we organize a multi-billion-dollar industry that can feed into the coffers of our city, and I will continue to show our nightlife establishment how to expand and how to grow.
Okay, also as a borough president working with community boards, if it's determined that a community board made its decision based on a legal bias or discrimination, do you think a mechanism should be set up so either the board or the members can be held legally liable?
Help me understand that more.
If a community board makes a decision, for instance, not to accept a bar or low-income housing, and it could be proven that it was based on the fact that, for instance, people of color would be moving in, or the bar would have gay people as its chief clientele. If it could be proven that they made their decision based on bias, do you believe that there should be a mechanism in which they could be held legally liable?
I'm more comfortable with having them removed from the board. They're volunteers, and I'm not comfortable with holding them legally liable, more that they should be removed from the board.
Okay, thank you. What would your plan be to reduce homelessness and to take care of those who need to be served?
Well, number one, make it less profitable to continue homelessness. Think about this for a moment. You have people in temporary housing paying $250, $175 a night just to be in the shelter, $75 a night to go to a service provider to find them permanent housing. Some of them are in these temporary locations for 2 years. That's $1,700 a week. That's the Waldorf Astoria. There's no incentive to stop homelessness. I would look at all of these hotels that are built outside of the center business district that are willing to turn their small units instead of instead of a hotel establishment, let's turn them into housing, permanent housing. Let's start looking at micro units. Let's re-examine our current SOR laws and our zoning laws. There's some great projects of smaller units, shared spaces, living spaces, where people can have permanent housing and able to transition into larger spaces as they're capable of doing so. And let's re-examine NYCHA in a real way. The money we're about to spend to repurpose even a place like Red Hub projects. There are better ways for the money we're spending where you can actually build new housing on existing property in that area. We have to focus on smaller units, micro units, and really move to bring people into permanent housing. It could be done, and I'm sure we just have the right imagination and energy to accomplish the task.
Okay. Several people have messaged the question of what would you do about the Board of Elections and the crisis and misfunctioning of that body?
How many times are we going to get it wrong before we figure that we have to get it right? We're looking towards mail-in ballots. We don't give the right education to people on the ground when they need it. It's time to revamp the entire process and embrace a more technology to get it right. You know, with my background as a computer programmer, being a part of creating the first version of ComStat, that's the experience I bring to the city. How do we move this city into a real-time governing model where we can embrace technology? We have some of the best technology companies in this city. When you look at this city, we need to use them to run the city more effectively and more efficiently, such as the Board of the Election. It is inefficiency that breeds inequality, even in the election process.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you name the most important and significant accomplishment you've made as borough president in Brooklyn?
I believe clearly my Bellevue project at my project at Bellevue Hospital, first of its kind in America, was dealing with lifestyle medicine and reversing diseases. You know my story, diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, losing my sight, told I would be blind in a year, permanent nerve damage in my hands and feet. They said it was going to lead to amputations, as well as high blood pressure, high cholesterol. When I did embrace lifestyle medicine, I was able to reverse my vision loss in 3 weeks and was able to reverse my diabetes type 2 in 3 months. My 80-year-old mother was also, after 15 years being diabetic, she was able to cycle off her medicine as well. I have that program now at Bellevue Hospital with 750 people are on the waiting list, 250 people are in the program, and I believe we should have this in every health and hospital. I'm extremely pleased of what is happening and what I'm going to do around healthcare in this entire city. Health is wealth, and we have a healthcare system that's sick care and it's not sustainable, and it's time to stop traumatizing people with a healthcare system that's causing them to be more sick.
Okay, thank you. What would your plan be to save small business? So many storefronts will be empty for years because of the pandemic.
Several things we need to do. Number one, access to capital. We need to really start having small lending. We need to have backroom office through our chambers that they could assist with some of the documentation that is needed to run small business, like the HR that is accomplished and what they need. And also really change our procurement model that we have in this city. Far too much of the money in this city is going to other municipalities when we need to stop looking at the lowest cost for a product, but best value. We can make our own PPEs here. We can have many of our products. We went outside the city for so many products during the COVID-19. I say, let's start using our multi-billion procurement dollars to look right here in the city and ensure that we're getting the best value, but also give our small businesses support. Look how much money we spent over COVID-19 on food, how much money we spent on the other supplies and equipment that we needed. I invested in New Lab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard that created many of the products that was needed through COVID-19. And I think we need to continue to give our small businesses support and to retrofit them in many ways to what the future purchasing that we're going to need in the city, as well as giving them access to capital. And lastly, Alan, you talk to all the small businesses, they'll tell you the same thing. Hey, government, how about getting out of the way? How about stop making it difficult to file a permit or to get a utility company to open, to turn on our gas or electricity, or to have the FDNY do a sprinkler inspection, or have a lack of clarity on where you could put tables outside or not put tables outside. The biggest impediment to small business growth in the city is government in the city. The bureaucracy and the interference is in the way, and that is something that I'm going to streamline. One permit process where you can go to one-stop shop so we can move in an effective way.
Okay, on the issue of prisons, with the projected closing of Rikers, what is your view on the closing of Rikers, and what is your view on the neighborhood prisons, I believe in the 4 boroughs? Do you think we should be building more prisons? Are you in favor of the ones that have been put forward?
Well,
How do we close Rikers and move forward?
Well, it's no getting around. We're going to be dealing with a major financial crisis. We know what the budget deficit is, and not only on the city but the state level. So the first order of business, let's make sure who's incarcerated should be incarcerated, and we do that by looking at the almost 48% who are dealing with mental health issues. Let's give them the support that they need to prevent an incarceration like that. And then let's be really proactive and not reactive. Let's look at the 55% who have a learning disability and stop that flow. The almost 40%, according to a Texas study, that are dyslexic. Let's prevent that from happening to them. And then if we're going to build smaller jails in local communities like downtown Brooklyn, shouldn't be a skyscraper. It should be enough to fit into the footprint of the communities we're building them in. And at the same time, I'm a big believer, and I stated this often, people who have not committed predatory crimes, such as rape, robbery, and burglary, those who have not committed those crimes, we need to find an alternative way of ensuring that, number one, house arrest, bracelet, monitoring, or an alternative program to be in. That would decrease our prison population drastically.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, for your leadership, and for your friendship with the Jim Allis Liberal Democratic Club. And
thank you. Take care. Thank you for letting me come on.
Our pleasure. Bye-bye. Okay, I see our next candidate is here. Sean Donovan. Please unmute. Okay. We'd like you to spend about 2 minutes or so introducing yourself. Many people don't know you, and tell us who you are, why you're running, and why you believe you should have the support of progressive New Yorkers.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Sean Donovan. I'm a lifelong New Yorker who became a public servant because I grew up in a different time of crisis in this city. As a child in the 1970s, I walked past people sleeping on our streets. I saw our neighborhoods burning, and it lit a fire in me. I went to work for the National Coalition for the Homeless, and then for a nonprofit in the Bronx, rebuilding those same neighborhoods I'd seen burning as a child. Since then, in more than 2 decades of public service, I've learned to lead through crisis. As housing commissioner after 9/11 and HUD secretary after the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes, I helped millions of people keep their homes and worked with communities to build millions of units of affordable housing. When President Obama asked me to lead the recovery after Hurricane Sandy hit my hometown, I went to work making sure that we built back better and stronger. 3 weeks after I became budget director and Ebola emerged as a worldwide threat, we went to work making sure that it didn't become a pandemic that cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. And I made sure, while managing a $4 trillion federal budget, that we invested in progressive priorities while bringing down the deficit faster than any time since World War II. Through all these crises, I've learned that the most vulnerable before the crisis hit get hurt the most by it. And so we have to measure our recovery by the progress that we make for the most vulnerable. In fact, I believe I'm the true progressive in this race because of the progress that I've made for the most vulnerable over my 30-year career. I know that we can dramatically reduce homelessness in this city because I led the national strategy that cut homelessness by 25% and ended veteran homelessness in more than 100 cities. I know that we can fight racial inequality in our neighborhoods and our schools because as HUD secretary, I demanded that every community in this country prioritize racial equity and took away their federal funding if they wouldn't. I know that we can make real progress for LGBTQIA+ New Yorkers because I was the first cabinet secretary in history to endorse marriage equality, and I put in place landmark protections for transgender people that helped build the foundation for our recent Supreme Court victory. Let me close with something President Obama used to say to us all the time: never let a crisis go to waste. I know that I, as mayor, can help repair and rebuild this city, but I also know that we can reimagine this city together as a city that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go to our lightning round of yes or no. Will you not seek, and if offered, will you refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
Yes.
Will you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Commissioner require confirmation by the City Council?
No.
Okay. Will you not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
I would not interfere.
Okay. Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
Yes.
Oh. Will you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
Yes.
Thank you. Are you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump megadonor Sheldon Adelson?
Yes.
Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work?
Yes.
Do you oppose the Nordic model?
No.
Okay. You're for the decriminalization, but you're for the Nordic model?
Yes, I believe there's limited forms of decriminalization, as in the Nordic model, that can work.
Okay, thank you. Do you oppose the Bill de Blasio Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon's HQ2 to Long Island City?
I believe their proposal was the wrong proposal. I believe we could have gotten to a good proposal that should have been approved to bring those jobs here.
Okay, so you did oppose it then. Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Support legislation to oppose criminalization. So to allow them to get housing is what you're asking?
Yes, if somebody is formerly incarcerated, should they not be allowed to have the same rights as everyone else after they serve their time?
They should be able to get housing. And in fact, as HPD commissioner, I used my Section 8 vouchers to house people coming out of Rikers.
Okay, thank you. Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs and cats?
Did my wife ask you to ask this question? She knows I'm a lifelong I've had cats and dogs all my life, so it should be legal.
Okay, thank you. Will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the city administration?
Yes, in fact, I led the Ban the Box effort at the federal level as budget director.
Okay, do you support the removal of the nearly 300 homeless from the La Cerne Hotel due to pressure from local residents who don't want to live near homeless people?
No.
Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry?
No.
Will you refuse contributions from law enforcement unions or associations?
Yes.
Okay. Do you occasionally smoke weed?
Are my sons listening?
They're not
Not
registered.
in a long time.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to go to questions in which you have a few minutes to answer, up to 2 minutes. 1 second. During your tenure with the Bloomberg administration, on what issues were you vocal in your disagreement with the policies of his administration?
Well, obviously, stop and frisk, as the mayor himself has said, was a mistake. But we had disagreements as the mortgage crisis was emerging of who was at fault and what we needed to do to make sure people could stay in their homes. And so I led the creation of the very first effort across this country called the New York Center for New York City Neighborhoods that dramatically increased funding for counseling, legal protections, and funding to keep people in their homes. And obviously, as I became housing secretary for President Obama, we dramatically increased that aid to keep people in their homes. I believe that Wall Street victimized too many Black and brown people in Jamaica, in Southeast Queens, in the South Bronx, in so many neighborhoods across this city. And we needed to hold them accountable in a way that Mayor Bloomberg and I had some real disagreements. And in fact, that's what we did. I worked with Elizabeth Warren as HUD secretary to make sure that we created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and that we reached the largest settlement in our history to hold the banks accountable. I worked with Kamala Harris on that and Beau Biden, and we made sure that we held the banks accountable. We're able to save millions and millions of homes across the country and invested hundreds of millions of dollars in New York City for legal protections, counseling, and other work to help people keep their homes.
Thank you. You are the architect or an architect of the Bloomberg housing policy. Some people say that led to rezonings, that led to gentrification and displacement. Can you address that, please?
Sure. Look, I am proud of the work that I did under Mayor Bloomberg. We had the most aggressive housing plan in the country. We created and preserved more affordable housing than any city in the country. And I believe through the creation of inclusionary zoning, we created a tool that could lock in affordable housing in neighborhoods permanently to make sure that it never disappeared. But I also think that there are other steps, particularly given as gentrification has accelerated over the last 10 years, there are steps that we need to go farther. I believe the right to legal counsel is important. I believe that the strengthening of rent stabilization and the rent laws at the state level and the strong enforcement of that is going to be critical in preventing displacement. And I believe we need the right kind of community-oriented planning so that when we rezone or we bring other resources to a neighborhood, we make sure that revitalization of a community happens with and for the community, not to that community.
Okay, as HUD secretary, you created the RAD program to privatize public housing. Do you support the privatization of NYCHA?
So to be very clear, RAD does not privatize public housing.
Right.
There are many, many cities across the country that have utilized RAD to preserve public housing and to keep it in public ownership. The version that Mayor de Blasio has implemented here has used privatization, but RAD absolutely does not require it. And in fact, there are lots of examples around the country where that is not true. I believe strongly that we need to preserve public housing, and RAD was an effort to make sure that we had long-term sustainable funding for public housing, because what I'd seen over and over again is cuts by the Republican Congress to public housing funding and not cutting Section 8 funding. So I believe Section 8 funding was a better path to preserving public housing. But again, to be clear, you can have public ownership, you can have nonprofit ownership, you can have all different kinds of ownership under RAD. And I am not a supporter of many of the steps that Mayor de Blasio has taken. Instead, I believe that models like in San Francisco and other parts of the country can truly preserve public housing while working with residents closely and making sure that we preserve long-term public ownership of the land.
Okay. It's been suggested by a newly registered Democrat who's running for mayor that people who want to march or demonstrate or protest need to individually register with the government to be allowed to participate. Do you agree with that? And also, it's been suggested that people who march en masse, that there has to be registrations and permits. Many times demonstrations that are historic in the civil rights movement happen spontaneously due to a tragic incident. Should the people be allowed to march without having a hierarchy apply for a permit? And what would you do with marches such as the Dyke March, which has been going on since 1993, which on principle will never apply for a permit? It has survived 3 mayors. Would you close them down?
Not only do I believe it's unconstitutional to restrict protest in that way, but I believe that it is a fundamentally American tenet that we should be able to peacefully protest our government. In fact, 30 years ago, I helped organize a commemoration of the Freedom Rides where we retraced the route, met John Lewis. I became friends with him over 30 years. And I learned not only that peaceful protest is a critical right, I learned how it changed this country. And fundamentally, anyone who would restrict the right of peaceful protest is restricting our rights as Americans.
Thank you very much. Another question here from Jamal Henderson regarding City University. How would you secure that they are free and fully funded? Do you have an educational plan that would provide that for City University?
Absolutely. In fact, when I was budget director, we proposed free community college for the entire country. And I believe it's a tragedy that in so many cities and states across the country, public education has been losing its funding. When Joe Biden is elected in 3 weeks, I am the best person to work in partnership with President Biden and Vice President Harris to make sure that we are investing in education, and particularly in systems like CUNY, which are engines of opportunity. I also believe that we need to be doing much more to make sure that we're connecting at this time of depression level unemployment, that we are connecting our community colleges and our four-year colleges directly to jobs. So I'm in favor of a dramatic expansion of apprenticeships and other ways to ensure that we're putting more Black and brown New Yorkers, more low-income New Yorkers, more immigrant New Yorkers to work as we recover.
Okay, can you explain what proposal would you have to help save the nightlife industry? And another question, what will you do to save small businesses as a result of the pandemic?
So first of all, we can't, our small businesses, our nightlife can't recover until we end this pandemic. And we need a much more effective response. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I was 3 weeks into the job as budget director when Ebola emerged. I was a leader when Zika emerged across the country. And we put in place the testing, the contact tracing, all of the critical steps that made sure that it didn't turn into a pandemic that cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. And so it is unacceptable that this city still to this day does not have a full testing strategy and has not been able to get this pandemic under control, as we've seen with the recent flare-ups in too many communities across the city. So that's first. Second, what I would do is put in place for small businesses and retail the ability to more creatively use the space that we have. Why are we just allowing restaurants to use street space when we could effectively create outdoor markets and other ways that retail and small businesses could do better? I also would say that we need to use our recovery efforts to invest in small businesses rather than hiring contractors and big companies from outside New York. Let me give you an example. When the pandemic emerged, I raised over $1 million for an effort I created called Common Table, which got our restaurants in New York City cooking again to provide emergency meals delivered directly to people's homes. We served over 40,000 meals directly to people in their homes in 5 different communities: Brownsville, the South Bronx, Corona, the hardest hit communities in New York. And not only did we get fresh, healthy food directly to people's doors, to seniors who couldn't go out, to those who were already sick, but we got restaurants cooking again. We got restaurant workers back to work in a way that should be a model for how we're using all of our recovery dollars to ensure that we're getting our small businesses and our nightlife moving again. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Louis put me on mute. I think we could go to one more question.
I hope you're not taking it personally.
On the issue of Rikers.
Yes.
What's your position on the closing of Rikers, and where do we put, what's your position on the neighborhood prisons? What's your solution? There are people who favor the neighborhood, the new facilities, because we want to close Rikers, and the new facilities are going to be updated and modern and available to families, and other people who believe that we should not have any more prisons. Where do you fall out of these issues?
Alan, I believe the decision to close Rikers was a landmark in our progress towards criminal justice reform in this city. And while I look forward to the day when we no longer have to have any jails, I believe that we have to move forward with the plan for neighborhood jails because we have to close Rikers. It is simply unacceptable that the almost 4,000 folks we have at Rikers today are unable to see their families, unable to get the help that they need, and that they're totally disconnected from their communities. And I understand that there's resistance. I live just a few blocks from the site where the Brooklyn jail will be. And I am happy to have that in my community if it means that we can close Rikers and make sure that the folks that are there can get the help, the connection to their families that they need. And by the way, closing Rikers means that we can dramatically reinvest in housing, in job training, in other services that are absolutely critical. My plan for criminal justice is to reduce police involvement, reimagine the relationship of police and corrections, and reinvest in key priorities to get folks back into their communities. And I know this because I worked for President Obama. He was the first president in the last 50 years who reduced the crime rate and the incarceration rate at the same time. As I said, I used Section 8 vouchers, housing assistance, to help folks coming out of Rikers. 95% of them were stably housed after a year and dramatically reduced recidivism. So I know from direct experience that we can do this because I have done it in my public service. I also know as a budget director that we're currently spending almost $600,000 a year per prisoner at Rikers. Moving to neighborhood jails could dramatically reduce what we're spending in corrections and allow us to reinvest that funding in critical priorities to ensure that we break the prison pipeline out of our schools and out of too many Black and brown communities in New York.
Okay, thank you. I guess we could do one more question here. What do you think is the solution to the integration of schools? The Upper West Side, there was a program to integrate the schools led by Helen Rosenthal, who took on local community people that did not want their children sent to minority schools. What would you do to integrate our public school system?
Well, first of all, Alan, and this is one of the reasons that I went to work in housing to begin with, the root of racial inequality in our society comes from the segregation in our housing and neighborhoods. It's why, as HUD Secretary for President Obama, I led the fight to give the Fair Housing Act real meaning. In fact, I'm sure you've been following President Trump's attacks on Joe Biden, saying that he would destroy the suburbs because he wants to make sure Black and brown folks can live anywhere they want to. Well, I'm the guy that put in place those rules. I'm the guy that President Trump is coming after because of my work to make communities, to make our neighborhoods more racially just and more racially integrated. So that's a key piece that we have to take on that's at the root of why our schools are segregated. Beyond that, though, I think we need to take a number of steps. And actually, I think there's some good models in Park Slope and other places where we've begun to reduce the barriers to integration through the Gifted and Talented program and a range of other steps and testing. The way that we distribute seats in our public school system in New York is compounding the racial inequality that we have in our neighborhoods. And I believe that we need to scale up some of those pilots that we're doing and really take this on in a more systematic way.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate it. And hope you spend the next 3 weeks busting ass to get rid of our president.
Amen. I'll be doing that. I know you will be too.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. It was good meeting you.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Is Scott there?
Scott,
he is.
online.
There he is. Scott,
Hi.
welcome. Please introduce yourself to the 1 or 2 people who don't know you out of the 1,200 people online. And then we'll go to our lightning round.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for having me tonight. And many of you I have known over the years. I think it's important to disclose that I've known Alan Roscoff more than most of you for most of my life when he was lobbying my mother's council member in Washington Heights for the gay rights bill. And I met him as a very young kid. And Alan has been in my life when my wife and I got married to protest gay marriage in Connecticut in 2010. It was Alan Roscoff who gave me the idea. and off I went to Connecticut. And so you have been part of my life, and tonight is a tribute to your political ability to bring 1,200 people to the first mayoral forum. So I want to just say that, look, I'm running for mayor because I want to bring leadership back to City Hall. We've seen what happens when you have no leadership there, and New Yorkers are crying out for fundamental change. And I don't have to tell anyone on this Zoom tonight that our city is facing enormous challenges. We have a social justice crisis, an economic crisis, a public health crisis raging all at once. And I have a track record of fighting for justice, and I have the financial expertise and the vision to tackle these challenges head on. I'm going to manage the hell out of this city. We're going to build New York back bigger and stronger than ever, and we're going to make it a more just city in the process. I have the progressive record of speaking up for justice and getting things done. Many of you know I was the first elected official to call for Rikers Island to close, first to divest from private prisons, called for the end of commercial bail bonds in New York City, pushed abolishment of mandatory criminal surcharges. And I know my record of 35 years fighting for the LGBT community is real, as one of the original sponsors of marriage equality in the Assembly, and the first citywide elected official to propose all single-use bathrooms be labor gender neutral. We led that coalition nationally in my time as controller. My work is far from over, our work is far from over, but the stakes can never be higher. And I'm glad to be here tonight at this first forum so I can get to know the people I don't know and offer my vision for the city and take Alan's gentle questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I happen to have known you since you were 12 years old.
It's amazing.
First question. Whoops. Given your, we're going to the yes or no's. I'm sorry. First question, will you seek or accept the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
Well, I'm not going to seek his endorsement, and I'm probably the least likely candidate to get it.
So the answer is you will not. Okay. Number two, would you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
In January of 2022, should I become mayor, we will have a new police commissioner, a commissioner who is aligned with my policing agenda and the values of this city.
Okay, that's a yes. Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Commissioner require confirmation by the City Council?
No.
Okay. Would you not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
Probably not. No.
You won't interfere. Okay, thank you. Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
No, I think we have to have a larger conversation about statues, and I think that has to come with real thought and not zeroing in on any particular statue at this time.
Okay. Will you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
No.
Okay. Are you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson?
I'm for opposing any casinos in New York owned by Adelson or otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work?
Yes.
Do you oppose the Nordic model?
Yes.
Okay. Do you oppose the de Blasio-Cuomo proposal and giveaway? Did you oppose the de Blasio-Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon HQ2 to Long Island City?
Yes, it was a failed ULURP application the moment it was done in secret, and it got worse from there.
Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Yes.
Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs and cats?
Yes.
Okay. Will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the city administration?
Yes.
Okay. Do you support the removal of nearly 300 homeless people from the Luzerne Hotel due to pressure from local residents who do not want to live near homeless individuals?
No, and this is an outgrowth of the mayor's failed homeless policies for the last 7 years, and now moving these men who have serious issues from place to place is inhumane and wrong.
Thank you. Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry?
I am not taking money from big developers.
And what about all law enforcement unions or associations?
I'm not taking money from law enforcement agencies.
Okay, and last question, do you occasionally smoke weed?
Not anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now go to questions in which you have 2 minutes to respond. You say you will not take money from real estate industry, but you had already taken a big chunk. Will you, for this mayoral race, will you be returning those contributions?
I have not taken money from this mayoral race, money that was rolled over. Some of it was returned, some of it wasn't. Suffice to say, from the moment I'm running, I am only taking money from people who I have met at house parties, and a lot of those contributions, most of them are under $250. We have an amazing campaign finance program, so I'm not taking real estate contributions. I want to make it very clear to people where I stand on housing, leave no doubt in people's mind that I'm going to be the mayor that's going to build affordable housing, real affordable housing, and chart a new course for housing in this city. By not taking the contributions, I think I put a marker down.
Okay, thank you. You have staked out an anti-development position, as have your supporters. Yet as Manhattan Borough President, you supported Hudson Yards, the rezoning of St. Vincent's Hospital site, which led to the closing, and supported the massive NYU rezoning. How do you rationalize your position now vis-a-vis when you were Borough President?
Look, as borough president, I work very closely with our community boards. We did development from the bottom up, instituted community board reform. After the ULURPs were going to be decided, I then tried to get the best deal I could for the community. That's what the borough president at the time was able to do. I think I did as well as could be expected. Obviously, there were times we won, times we lost, and sometimes we got the best deal we could for the community.
Okay, thank you. What would be your plan to save small business vis-a-vis the pandemic?
Well, I issued a 25-point plan. Look, the centerpiece of this recovery has to be about our small businesses. We have 280,000 small businesses that employ 50 people or less. And even before the pandemic, we saw that vacancy rates went from 5 million square feet to 10 million square feet from 2007 to 2017. So we need to do a couple of things. First and foremost, we need to incentivize new businesses to go to our vacant corridors. That's why we need the tax incentives that will give them an impetus to go there. We also need to keep the businesses we have, especially in communities of color where so many businesses are shutting down because they didn't get relief from the federal government. So in addition to taxes, I want our city workers to understand that they've got to go knock on doors and help build a tech platform for so many of our businesses to expand. We also have to do a better job bringing our businesses into the streets, our retail spaces, as well as our food and beverages spaces. The plan that I released is a plan that focuses on revitalizing small businesses, which is the best way we're going to revitalize our economy. And lastly, the collateral damage to COVID has been incredible to our small businesses. We've already lost 520,000 people who used to be in small business industries, and now they're unemployed, adding to the million people who are now jobless in the city. So any recovery has to start with small businesses. The plan I put forth, I think, is a good start.
Okay, from Sam Himmelstein, regarding the tens of thousands of tenants who have been unable to pay their rent due to the COVID crisis. What do you think the city could do, and what would you do as mayor? It could be tens of thousands of evictions. What would be your plan?
First of all, we have got to cancel rent for people who can't pay it. This pandemic is no fault of the people who had jobs and suddenly don't have them. We've got to make sure that any federal stimulus package, there's money included, as Maxine Waters has put forth, opportunity to have resources to pay rent for people. But at the end of the day, wholesale eviction would cause undue hardship. We have to continue to make sure that there are programs to help people during this time. But look, at the end of the day, we also have to think about the 30% of the people who are in homeless shelters, who have jobs, minimum wage jobs, but they can't find housing. People won't rent housing to them. And that's why I've also, in addition to putting forth the 25-point plan for business revitalization, I've also put forth a very comprehensive plan to build low-income housing in this city so that we can help the tens of thousands of people who are working, who are contributing, who are raising families, but they're languishing in homeless shelters because the city is not building housing for low-income individuals. In fact, Alan, the rezonings put forth by the mayor over the last few years, starting at the beginning of his term, were basically ways to gentrify communities, not build the housing we actually needed. In the Stringer administration, we would have a wholesale change in housing, both in terms of protecting people in their homes and also building the real housing that we need. And lastly, I'm the Democrat when I was in the assembly, much younger than I am today, was the only Democrat who voted against weakening the rent laws in 1993 that started this spiral to evicting people and gentrifying communities.
Okay, thank you. On the integration of schools, did you support Helen Rosenthal's drive to integrate the schools on the Upper West Side? And how would you, as mayor, proceed into integrating the education?
Well, I support, I support integration of the schools on the West Side. There were many architects and authors of plans to integrate and other elected officials as well. But I do think we need an integration plan for our public schools. As the candidate for mayor who has kids in the public school system and realize how privileged my third grader and second grader are, it is absolutely wrong that we continue to have two standards of education in this system. We need to integrate our schools. We need to resource our schools fairly and justly. And Alan, I'm going to put out a comprehensive plan shortly, just like I did with housing and with small businesses, to address this specifically.
Okay, thank you. What is your point of view on privatization of land on NYCHA grounds?
Look, I've been an advocate for NYCHA my entire adult life. And look, NYCHA was built in the 1930s under Mayor LaGuardia. It was inspirational housing. It was the housing, if you got it, you were on your way to the middle class. And then the federal and state and city divestment has been epic. We have never had a full funding of NYCHA in any modern day presidency, any modern day governorship, or in the city. That has to change. We've got to protect the 400,000 people who live in NYCHA. I've done the audits. I've audited NYCHA more than all the controllers combined. And it is absolutely unbelievable to me that the mismanagement that occurred under this administration was allowed to fester and put so many people in jeopardy, whether it was lead paint, whether it was lack of repairs, whether it was totally mismanagement at every single level. I want to rebuild NYCHA building by building. And when I'm mayor, we're going to move the operations of a NYCHA plan into City Hall, where every day we think about how we can make things better. Hopefully under a Biden administration, we'll reverse course and get the money that we need from the federal government. But I've also called for different ways to create more funding streams so we can fix boilers, fix the broken windows, fix the staircases. It doesn't have to be this way. And NYCHA must be part of the recovery. We cannot open this economy the same way we closed it. We have to invest in the communities hardest hit by COVID. That includes NYCHA residents as well as residents who have struggled with lack of housing, lack of health resources. And that is why the next mayor can fundamentally change the direction of the city.
Two last questions. One, what would you do to save nightlife in the city of New York? As borough president of Manhattan, you know about the efforts to hurt nightlife by NIMBYism of community boards, et cetera. But with the COVID crisis, they are really in a state of crisis. What's your solution?
Well, look, I think like the restaurants, we have an opportunity to think about different ways to alter business models. And what I would suggest in a very complicated situation, because obviously with COVID, people congregating in large spaces, enjoying nightlife is very problematic at this time, but we shouldn't wait for the vaccine. We should start laying a foundation now for a model that can work. So what I would say about nightlife, including our theaters, let's take to the streets. We saw how successful the streets could be for outdoor dining and for retail space. We've got to move theater and the arts and culture into our parks, into our playgrounds, into our streets. We don't need to have cars running down the street. What we need to do is have artists and dance and transform the city in an exciting way. All it takes is management, vision, and working collaboratively with nightlife owners, small businesses to get some of this done. And I think we had a good start.
Do you believe that City University should be free? And if so, how would you achieve that?
Well, I certainly think the community colleges for $160 million a year should be free. I think we can certainly move to make sure all of CUNY is free. CUNY is going to be the centerpiece of a plan I have for workforce development that we are actually announcing tomorrow. So I wanted to make news tonight on your Zoom, but seriously, we have a plan to think about the jobs that are not coming back and the jobs that will be part of the city and how we can transfer people to those jobs. So workforce development, I can't think of a better place to use the structure and the resources at CUNY to build that plan, as well as create the free tuition that will make more people go to CUNY.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. We will be in touch with you, and thank you for signing the letter to the governor regarding clemency, and we will talk soon.
And thank you for your years of friendship. I couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Okay, our next candidate is Diane Morales. Hi, how are you? You have to unmute. Okay.
Hi, Alan. I'm good, thank you.
Welcome to the Jim Owls Liberal Democratic Club. We have about 1,200 people listening in, and we're now going to go to our yes or no questions. Opening comments, please. Introduce yourself. Tell us why you're running and why you believe progressive New Yorkers should support you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Alan, and thank you to all of you for being here. It's a pleasure to be able to have an opportunity and a platform to share my experiences and my background. Let me start off by saying, first of all, that I want to acknowledge I am not a career politician. My candidacy is 100% grassroots, and it's a people-powered movement that is reflective of New Yorkers who are ready to forge a new social contract for the city. I have spent my entire life working in communities, shoulder to shoulder with people, trying to help people access opportunities to live in dignity and provide for their families. I'm not beholden to any political establishment, and nor is my team comprised of those who have benefited from politics as usual. That being said, what I am is an Afro-Latina who was born and raised in Bed-Stuy. I'm a first-generation college graduate and the single mother of 2 young college students. While I have navigated personal challenges of my own, I also have been helping my entire career, helping Black and brown families access opportunities to move out of poverty through education and economic growth. My personal and professional experiences have made me acutely aware of longstanding, deeply ingrained systemic and structural barriers that really work to prevent true equity and justice for so many of our communities here. I've taken on the New York City Department of Education in order to secure critical services for both of my children. I have navigated the hospital system in order to obtain reasonable mental health services for my children. And I have called out the NYPD for profiling and assaulting my son. As the leader of human service organizations, I have developed a national organization that focused on developing literacy skills in early preschool children, while also contributing to the teacher training pipeline by training college students. And I have worked effectively with the federal government to create legislation to enable work-study students to participate in the National AmeriCorps program. I have created safe spaces, programming, and housing for the LGBTQ youth population. I have created an outreach program at the Christopher Street Piers for them, and I have developed cross-sector partnerships between employers and higher education and community-based organizations that have provided career pathways in healthcare that exceeded national averages for promotion and retention for the participants. My executive experience creating alternatives to help families overcome challenges has really given me a unique perspective on what it takes to fundamentally transform how we operate. I'm running for mayor because I'm ready to tackle the root causes of these problems. We're living in an unprecedented time that really calls for a radical reimagining of what is possible. And I think it's critical that our leadership be reflective and representative of those of us who have struggled the most and not those who are tied to the old ways of operating New York City. New York City needs leadership that's unapologetic and unabashed about the need for us to create a new social contract that centers and elevates communities that have historically been left behind. And that is what I am here to do.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to go to the lightning round.
Okay.
Will you not seek, and if offered, refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
I will not seek, nor will I accept the endorsement of de Blasio.
Okay. Will you fire Police Commissioner Shea?
Absolutely.
Okay. Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Yes, and I think that the recent death of Young Sang is a critical indication as to why that is necessary.
Okay. Should the NYPD Commissioner require confirmation by City Council?
Yeah, I think that would be a great move. Yes.
Would you not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
No, I would not interfere.
Okay. Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
Yes, I am. I am in favor of replacing it with one that would honor and pay tribute to the indigenous people.
Great. Were you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
I like the name of the 59th Street Bridge as the 59th Street Bridge, so I would keep it that way.
No. It's now the Edward I. Koch Bridge.
Right,
Okay.
I know.
The answer is yes. Thank you. Do you support the removal of nearly 300 homeless men from the La Cine Hotel due to pressure from local residents who don't want to live near the homeless?
No, I do not support that. Everybody has a right to live somewhere, and everybody has a right to live in dignity.
Thank you. Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry?
I have already clearly stated I will not accept contributions from the real
And
estate.
will you refuse contributions from all law enforcement unions and associations?
Given that I was the first mayoral candidate to call for the defunding of the police, I don't think that contributions would be forthcoming, but yes, I will refuse them.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, do you occasionally smoke weed?
I prefer edibles.
Oh, okay. The answer is yes then. Thank you. Okay, we just got an email, a text regarding you being an executive director at FIPS.
FIPS neighborhoods, yes.
Yes, and they highlight that they are one of the worst evictors in New York City. Can you talk about that?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. The first sort of critical distinction to make is that FIPS Neighborhoods is an affiliate of FIPS Houses, which is the entity in question. FIPS Houses develops housing, rents housing, and manages and operates housing. FIPS Neighborhoods actually has nothing to do with that part of the shop. I was responsible for providing human services to over 10,000 residents of the South Bronx, and primarily focused on areas of education and career, including creating a model for after-school programs that was replicated citywide by the Department of Youth and Community Development because it was found to be so effective in supporting academic achievement in students, and also in the creation of a healthcare program that helped provide career pathways to young adults who were unemployed or underemployed in the sector of healthcare, in partnership with Montefiore Medical Center and Hostos Community College. Those were the kinds of things that I was responsible for in my tenure at Phipps Neighborhoods.
Thank you. I left out a page of questions on the yes or no. So I have to go back to that. I believe there are 6 questions. Are you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson?
Absolutely.
Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work?
Yes.
Do you oppose the Nordic model?
Yes, I believe that the Nordic model continues to criminalize Black and Brown communities, immigrant communities, the LGBT population, and has an impact on the sex worker economy. Sex work is work.
Got it. Did you oppose the de Blasio Cuomo proposal giveaways for Amazon HQ2 in Long Island City?
Yes, I agree with community, the community demand to oppose that, yes.
Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Yes, I do.
And are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs and cats?
Yes.
Okay.
As a dog and cat owner, absolutely yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to go on to other questions. How do you plan to reduce mass incarceration and the secondary impact of carceral state in New York City?
So, mass incarceration goes back to the sort of deeply ingrained issues of racism and discrimination in this country. I think that, as the first mayoral candidate to have called for defunding the NYPD, what goes hand in hand with that is the provision of critical services and programs to communities that need it most. The redefinition of what public safety looks like. Public safety for too long has been equated with policing. And the reality of it is that communities that experience the highest policing are also subjected to the highest harassment by police and actually feel the least safe. And so, defunding the police would be a critical step in that. Providing other critical services in those communities would also be a step in that. And also holding the police accountable when they impinge upon and racially profile and discriminate against people of color and low-income communities and other marginalized communities.
Okay, do you believe that City University should be free? And if so, how would you fund and provide the services?
Yeah, I do think that the City University should be free. It was free once upon a time, and it wasn't until it seemed like most Black and Brown communities started to become aware of that and take advantage of that opportunity that we started to move towards a system where CUNY was no longer free. I think that there's a lot to be said for creating a K through 16 continuum in New York City that provides equal access and free access to every New York City student. To CUNY. I think there's a lot to be said also for thinking about how we creatively integrate career readiness and work training programs into the curriculum at CUNY so that we are, graduating students who are ready to enter the world as we live in today or in the future, not the world that we lived in 50 years ago. And so, I think we would need to creatively think about how we support and fund that, but it would absolutely be one of the things that I would want to take seriously and pursue under my mayoralty.
Okay, thank you. On the issue of small business, what would be your plan to save small businesses vis-a-vis the pandemic?
Sure. I think that one of the things we should be thinking about and looking at is how we could lower rents or mortgages for small businesses. I would want to look at how we could provide grants and tax incentives. We have bailed out large corporations during this critical time and lost our focus on the small mom and pop and the average New Yorkers as much as we should have. Low interest loans, figuring out how to make those available to small businesses, and also incentivizing businesses that are willing to partner with the city in terms of providing job training opportunities to so many young people and others who are out of work and might be interested in exploring a different career or a different pathway. Doing a sort of killing two birds with one stone, so to speak, and being able to support those businesses while we're also supporting the unemployed workforce in sort of building skills and training and moving towards the future. I think those are things we could be looking at. I would also want to think about how we could focus on minority-owned, LGBT-owned businesses, as evidenced by, there were very, very few minority-owned businesses that actually got access to the payroll protection program. And I think that's a reflection of some systemic issues and challenges in terms of the city. So from an economic justice perspective, I would want to look at how we could center and prioritize those types of businesses to help them come back first.
With the closing of Rikers, what do you see as a solution? Are you in favor of the community prisons that are been proposed? If not, what's your solution?
No, I'm not in favor of the community jails. I really think that we need to fundamentally move away from policing as we know it. The state of policing is a direct descendant of the slave patrols from chattel slavery. I don't think that you can tinker around anything that is associated with that sort of foundation and expect to get dramatically different results. I think we need to move away from that model completely, move towards one that centers restorative justice after we have, of course, provided all the services and programs to communities that they actually need to thrive. And so, I'm not in favor of closing Rikers and replacing it with 5 local jails. I don't think that that's actually going to make much of a difference for the communities that have been discriminated against the most by the policing system.
Okay, thank you. What would you advocate as far as a solution to the hardships about that nightlife throughout the city are going through?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I have really good friends who own a small bar around the corner, and they are just getting slammed right now. I think, we need to do things in addition to some of the things I mentioned before in terms of just small businesses in general, the grants, the tax incentives, the low interest loans. I would want us to think about how we could decouple the personal guarantees that so many of these people have made, whether it's, they're in jeopardy of losing their businesses, and now because of what they've put up in order to open that business, they're also now in jeopardy of potentially losing their homes or whatever else, whatever savings they had. So I think we have to decouple those things. I would want to, again, also look at how we could lower rents or forgive rents and sort of level that in such a way so that they are able to stay in their spaces. I'd also want to look at there is the idea of protections for landlords in terms of collecting rent, but for renters, for business owners who are renting space, but have not actually been able to operate businesses during this period of time. I think we need to look at special programs to enable them to be forgiven for that period of time or have it extended on the back end while we also help them get back on their feet.
Okay, one of your opponents, a recently registered Democrat, maintains that anybody who participates in a demonstration, a protest, etc., should, as an individual, have to register with the government in order to participate. Also, that all demonstrations have to have permits. And as we all know, many demonstrations are spontaneous due to crisis that occurs. And there are also historic protests, such as the Dyke March, which has been going on since 1993, which has never gotten a permit based on their philosophy, and they have survived 3 mayors. Do you believe that people who want to protest, participate in the Women's March, etc., should individually have to register? And do you think protests have to have licenses?
I gotta tell you, as someone who has been very active, not just in protests, but in the planning and organizing of protests for a very long time, but particularly over the course of the last 7 months, no, I do not agree or believe that people should be required to fill out or obtain permits. It's kind of counterintuitive to the whole idea of protesting. If you have to get permission to protest first, especially if you're trying to get permission from the people that you're protesting against. It just doesn't make any sense. So I do not agree with that. I have served, I've marched, I have organized, I've served as a marshal for many of the protests, including the Queer Liberation Parade March in June. I don't think that these are instances where we should have to apply for or be given permission.
Okay, I believe our last question would be what you propose to do regarding the tens of thousands of people who haven't paid their rent and face eviction.
I think their rents should be forgiven. I think we should be looking to provide support to small homeowners who might be harmed by that idea. But I think that, unless we're going to find a way to provide significant financial support and funding to those who have been impacted by this and are unable to pay their rent, that exacerbating that by evicting them and putting them out on the streets is only going to make things worse. People have a right to housing. They have a right to live in dignity, and having a roof over your head is a critical part of that. And we need to find other ways to address the challenges that New York City is dealing with right now. We need to put the good of the collective over the good of any individual landlord, especially the larger landlords who can more than afford to absorb these costs based on all of the tax breaks and incentives that they have gotten in New York City to date.
Okay. The Civilian Complaint Review Board makes decisions and makes recommendations which are usually ignored by the police department. Do you think that they should be empowered to make decisions that the police department are mandated to effectuate, such as firing an officer, fining an officer, or penalizing an officer? That they're no longer recommendations, but mandates?
Yeah, I think we need some sort of independent entity that has ultimate responsibility and authority to hold officers accountable when they engage in egregious behavior that violates other people's civil and human rights. For too long, officers have operated with impunity, and there needs to be some sort of mechanism to hold them accountable so that it is clear that they are not, in fact, running this city, but they have to be held accountable to the people who are the ones that they're supposed to keep safe.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate, 1 minute, Jeff, is Maya here?
Nope.
Okay, then we could go on and ask you another question or two. People, please keep sending in your questions. What is the cost of affordable housing?
What does that mean?
Well, how would you derive the definition of affordable housing? Is it by income percentage or what?
I think that's part of the problem, right? The way we have calculated AMI in order to determine what is affordable is highly problematic, because AMI often ends up being inaccessible to the bulk of New York residents that needs housing. And so I think it should be, much more related to what someone is earning rather than as an individual rather than an area. And so, affordable is not affordable to everybody, but everybody should be able to afford some place to live.
Okay, you come from the Bronx. And
actually, I come from Bed-Stuy.
Right, but I thought you then said you moved to the Bronx.
No, I worked in the Bronx for the last 10 years.
Okay, well, the Bronx has the largest cases of asthma and some of the worst health crises in the city.
Yes.
And for years and years and years, everybody knew this, but little's been done. If you were mayor, how would you do away with the discrepancy of healthcare in the city?
Sure. So I'm a strong proponent of environmental justice, which really means centering and focusing on the communities that have been harmed the most by our less than environmentally friendly practices. I will say that diplomatically. And so, you know, I think that having worked in the Bronx for the last 10 years, I had a front row seat to children who were suffering from asthma and unable to attend school, and then were being taken care of in emergency rooms because they didn't have health care. The cycle and the connection between all of these things and the detrimental sort of multi-layered impact that it has on the neediest and sort of most challenged families is irrefutable. We need to move towards a just recovery for those communities where we are addressing the infrastructure, where we are providing jobs for those communities, where we are providing housing and providing healthcare for those communities so that they are able to, in fact, really sort of move forward from all of the deficits that have been layered upon them and their communities over decades, if not centuries.
Okay, thank you very, very much. We'll be talking to you soon. Thank you for doing your first forum with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Okay. Jeff, have you been able to reach Maya?
No, I have not. I've called the number that I have and texted, and I haven't been able to reach her.
Okay, give me 30 seconds to text her campaign manager, okay?
Would you like a little Randy Rainbow in the meantime?
Wait 1 minute, please.
Okay.
If we don't get a response in 30 seconds, we'll go to Randy. What? She's responding. We got a text message from Jamani Williams, 4 thumbs up for asking the question about smoking weed.
Let's take a break with a little Randy.
Okay, why don't you put on Randy? She's it's our
Welcome back to the first presidential debate. 2 queens stand before me. Gentlemen, before the time comes for you to lip sync for your lives, why don't we begin with some preliminary questions? Joe? How you doing?
Well, first of all...
Okay, I'm bored. Mr. President, here's a softball for you. Can I just get you to, if you don't mind, maybe condemn white supremacy real quick? Maybe you didn't.
He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly.
Vice President
if
Biden,
you look at the polls, I'm doing everyone than any Republican has done in a long time because they saw what you did.
I'm having a panic attack.
You and me both.
Oh my God, Patty Lupone, what are you doing here? I'm busy.
When gay men are in crisis, I just materialize.
Patty, I'm getting nervous. What if this gets reelected?
You gotta think positive, doll. Imagine how much better life would be if Trump got dumped.
Shafted?
William Howard Tafted.
If Donald got fired, we could go back to life as we once knew it. Miserable and unfair, but at least without the daily threat of complete authoritarianism and apocalyptic destruction.
Wouldn't that be nice?
If Donald got fired according to plan, just think of the things I could do. I'd stop having nightmares about Kellyanne and finally sing songs about somebody new. If Donald Donald got fired.
If Donald got fired, would that be sublime? I'd put down my bottles and balls. I'd be back on Broadway and belting sometime instead of cheap internet parody songs.
Excuse me?
Nothing? If Donald got fired.
President Trump did a phenomenal job.
Donald, quit running your scam. There's nothing to tout.
You're no Abraham.
Donald, we're all in a jam. Please get the hell out and take Lindsey Graham.
It would be so nice if he lost on election day.
I'd build him a new wall.
I'd pay for his U-Haul.
And I'd let Melania stay.
Really?
No. Oh, Donald, please go far away. If Donald got fired, there wouldn't be any more wreck. Less old complainy dictators regime.
He will destroy this country.
No more smug elites.
Whee! No more goddamn tweets.
Whee! Big news! Big news! Look, Daddy, I'm the worst president. Love me, love me.
Donald, the truth might be tough. The polls all project. We've all had enough.
Donald, don't stand there and scoff. With all due respect, please kindly fuck off.
I'm not going to do that.
I hope we choose right. The future's so dark and unknown.
There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together.
But there's no deciding. I'm riding with Biden.
I'm voting for Patty LuPone.
Yes, Queen!
Oh, Donald! Oh, Donald! Oh, Donald! Just leave us alone! Patty, I'm scared.
Girl, just vote.
I hope everybody enjoyed that, and you should know that Randy Rainbow sits on the board of the Jim Owls Liberal Democratic Club. I was supposed to let Maya know in advance if we were moving her time up, so it's really my fault that she's not on at the moment, but we do have Carlos Menchaca with us, so we will move forward with Carlos, and we will then do Maya last. So, Carlos, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, why you're running, and then we'll go to our lightning round.
Awesome. Thank you, Louis and Alan and Jeff, for setting this all up. This is not easy. And hello, Maya. Buenas noches. Maya's here as well. I want to just say buenas noches. I think the last time I was in front of everybody was when we were seeking the nomination for Cynthia Nixon. And here we are again. I'm Carlos Menchaca, I'm a city council member, and if you know about the work that I've been doing in partnership with community, it's rooted in Sunset Park and Red Hook, an incredibly diverse community. And what I've learned in the last 7 years, passing legislation, watching bad legislation get passed, watching the budget get constructed, and passing bad budgets, that we can do better. And I think that some of you have watched the mayoral race emerge and grow and evolve. And like many of you, I just wasn't happy. So I'm very serious about my entry into this race. I think that the COVID pandemic has really created an opportunity for us to really think about how we restructure this entire city, from every sector, from the unions to the private, and including developers and community, and how we all really work together to reconstruct in a better way. COVID has really impacted Black and Brown communities. Those are communities that I've been organizing with for such a long time. And I want to see their voices in government This administration and so many of the folks that work in this administration have refused to let the voices of our community in the halls of government. And it's in the city council and the work that I'm doing with many of my colleagues where we actually been seeing some amazing things happen. Just look at participatory budgeting and how people who have never engaged in government because they can't vote are engaging in how to make their communities blossom in their schools and their parks. That's the kind of spirit that I want to bring in to this race. That's the kind of voice I want to bring into this race and bring some fresh blood and really kind of ignite a whole new chapter. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is this. I've been hearing a lot about some of our most wealthy New Yorkers leave because they can. And who are left behind are the essential workers, the workers that I get to see every day. They're the ones that are rebuilding this economy right now. They're not waiting for the city council or the mayor to wake up one day. They're doing it now. They need some help. They need to remove some obstacles. And I'm going to do that in this council before I leave. And so I hope that Jim Al's and everyone else actually engages now so we can get some stuff done before we elect the next mayor, because that's what we're here to do. So thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you,
Here you
Carlos.
have some questions for me.
Okay, Maya, we're going to do you right after Carlos. I confused the time. Thank you. Okay, Carlos, going to lightning round. Will you not seek, and if offered, refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
I will not seek the endorsement of Bill de Blasio.
Okay, thank
Period.
you. Would you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Amen. Yes.
Should
Now.
the NYPD
Before the next mayor. Now.
Should the NYPD Commissioner require confirmation by the City Council?
Yes.
Okay.
Now. We don't have to wait for that.
The council process of picking a new speaker.
Sorry, repeat that question. I was talking in the middle of your question.
Interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker if you were mayor?
Being a council member, I know this is a yes or no question, so I'll say no. I will not interfere.
Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
Yes.
Will you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
Yes. And we can offer an opportunity for a person of color, someone in the BIPOC community in New York that can, that's a process that I think the council would be a great place to engage.
Or perhaps somebody who died of AIDS to replace the Ed Koch name.
There's so
are
many
you against the opening of casinos in New York owned and controlled by Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work?
Absolutely. And I've been fighting on that for a long time. Yes.
Do you oppose the Nordic model?
Yes.
Okay. Do you oppose the de Blasio-Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon headquarter twos to Long Island City?
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm on record for, yes.
Okay. Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Yes.
Okay. Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs and cats?
Okay, so I'm hearing this question as, can we allow dogs and cats to be part of living?
There are buildings that prohibit people from having a dog or a cat. Do you think that prohibition should be done away with?
Amen. Absolutely. I just got a pup myself, Lola.
Will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the city administration?
Amen. Yes. And then there's a lot of people on the ground doing that work, so I'm ready to engage them as well.
Okay. 1 second. Well, you're not helping me, Louis. 1 minute, Bill.
You guys are in the same room?
Louis is sitting next to me.
Oh my goodness. Where's your masks?
Here, one second. I'm really sorry. Well, we'll jump.
We're in a pod, people. We're a pod. It's all right.
We'll go to the last question. And while I look for the other, the last question that we always ask is, do you occasionally smoke weed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You really want our endorsement.
I prefer to ingest it, but that's for another conversation.
Okay. Do you support the removal of nearly 300 homeless from the Lucerne Hotel due to pressure from local residents who do not want to live near homeless men?
I do not support the removal of those New Yorkers on the Upper West Side.
Okay, thank you. Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry?
Yes.
Okay. Will you refuse contributions from all law enforcement unions or associations?
Yes, though I doubt they're going to give me any money, but absolutely.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to go to general questions, which we've asked all the candidates. How would you achieve making the City University of New York free? Do you believe it would be free? And if so, how would you achieve that?
Okay, so any budget question is going to be important to tackle like this. One, when you go back to CUNY, when you go back to alumni, when you go back to students right now, there's a massive movement and they have incredible ideas about how to do this. This is about prioritizing our city budget. It's about prioritizing our state budget. I think this has to be a double strategy to ensure that we get there. And we're going to have to make decisions about what else needs to be cut. This is why the defund movement was so important for us, because it actually allowed us to have a bigger understanding about where we are actually funding communities, and we're over-policed in our city. And so for me, I think the CUNY question is about prioritizing our budget today. We are, and again, I want to hear more questions about budget, but I think it's all under one umbrella. We are an abundant city. We have billions of dollars in our budget. This is about us making the decision, and this administration has not acquiesced to many of the council demands. And I think this is the opportunity. And I think that, I hope this is not the first time you're hearing this, but there needs to be a movement to build a people's budget, a budget that reflects the things that you just asked about in terms of CUNY being free. How does that happen? A people's budget that the council can do and that we can start working on right now can actually achieve that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm ready.
What do you propose, how would you propose to act regarding the potential eviction of tens of thousands of New Yorkers from their homes?
We got to cancel rent. That's a movement, and everyone needs to get on board. And I want the mayor to be on board. I think that's where we've lacked. What am I going to do to act? We need to support a push we have a Democrat-ruled Albany. Why isn't that happening? And I think that Cuomo needs to really feel the pressure to make that happen. And I think that just listening to the stories about what's happening in my district, we get so many cases where folks are in the middle of, and many of them are immigrants, in the middle of evictions, illegal evictions, and the council's done so much to protect them through legal representation, but we need to do more. And so I'm there. Cancel rent.
Okay, what have you done as a council member to help integrate New York City's school system? You know about the controversy on the Upper West Side where Helen Rosenthal led the fight to integrate.
Yes.
What role have you played?
So I'll take you back to Sunset Park. Sunset Park, District 15 is encompasses Park Slope and Sunset Park. We've had a lot of discussions on the ground, and the organizing that we've been doing, I don't think has gotten us there. I think we got a great start with removing the screens that were such a big issue for middle school students, but I think that's not enough. I think that we need to do a massive rethinking about how our schools are segregated, but I think we got to call the problem what it is, and I think the nice white parents, if I sat down and listened to that, I think really shows exactly what needs to happen. It's not rocket science. I think we can have the courage to do it. It's going to take a mayor administration, a new chancellor, and a city council that's ready to start pumping in resources where we need to. And a lot of the stuff that came out of Sunset Park, and I want to share this with you because I think this is important. There was a real clash of understanding about what diversity was from the very beginning. The Park Slopers were thinking about diversity in one way, and Sunset Park was thinking about diversity in another way. Sunset Park was talking about resources. We are an incredibly overcrowded school population. And when you think about changing the demographics, what Sunset Park wants, as important as the demographics, are resources. And as we're learning from all the study, is that when you pump in the right kind of resources, things begin to change. And the flight of a certain kind of student stops happening. And I think that's where we need to put a lot more resources into our schools.
Okay. You were one of the handful of council members who voted to defund the police. What is your definition of defund? And how do you think we could wrestle that money out of the budget for the police department and put it into needed services? If you were mayor, what would you do?
Well, one, if I was mayor, I'd be a lot more honest with the city council about what's happening within the budget itself. There's so many dark spaces in this budget that, to be honest, everybody tried to get. Our finance team, even the speaker, I give him a lot of credit for trying to get the information. So there's a lot more information, one. Two is that we need to be honest about things like the Vice Squad and other things that don't need to be there. And I know that there's a lot of union pitfalls and hurdles, but they're not unsurmountable. We can actually get around some of these things if we have the courage. That there's none at the mayor's office. I think two, we need to be honest about where we're going to put that money. So defund doesn't just mean about defunding NYPD, reducing the funding. It's about reinvestment. And the first group of people that came out with such clear and beautiful voices were the young people. They're the ones that reached out to us. They said, we cannot accept a budget that actually potentially increases NYPD while slashing SYEP. And they understood that to the value that they understood a budget that went to support their summer programs, their summer jobs. And once you start looking at that, you start looking at where we need to put more funding. And the first thing we need to do is get more information. We need to have the courage to actually remove funding. We're going to have to fire people. And that's not an easy question and thing to grapple with, but that's real, and reinvest it back into our communities. So defund is about reinvestment.
What would you do about save small businesses in light of the pandemic?
We've lost so many small business right now. It's decimated all our avenues in our communities. Where I'm seeing a lot of energy right now, and this is through my work as the chair of the immigration committee, is really where the energy are with immigrant businesses. Immigrant businesses have a lot of hurdles, and we need to figure out how we can support them. When I talked about some of the wealthy members of our, and not all of them, but I'm saying some of them have left, and who knows when they're going to come back. The people who are holding the city together are our small businesses. And that includes street vendors. We have yet to pass a piece of legislation in the city council to really franchise more legal opportunities for people to sell outside. That's a healthy COVID responsible thing. There are a lot of cooperatives that need more funding to be able to grow so we can have more immigrants. They're the backbone. New York City is an immigrant economy. And so I have a lot of ideas that I want to talk about throughout the next 8 months, and you'll hear from that. You'll hear about that.
Okay, what is your plan to rescue or save the nightlife community?
You know what I think about? Alan, I think about public health, and this is a public health issue. And I think that the nightlife community is going to be really, it's going to be hard. And this is even restaurants, inside restaurants, until we hit and confront COVID to reduce its impact in our communities. And I think those things come at really with the same importance. And I think that all of us, I love dancing. I do a lot of that in my time. And I want to go back into a nightlife experience, but we're going to have to confront COVID and what we need to do to make it to reconcile that. And so it's a public health issue, and we're going to have to solve that.
Where do you stand on taxing the wealthy, increasing the taxes on wealthy in New York City?
Oh, we got to do that. We got to do that. You know, and I was talking to folks about where people are getting taxed, and it's this fallacy that I think I'm talking to everybody that understands this, but I think that the wealthy need to be taxed now. The state has a lot of energy to make that happen, and they need to. So I want to tax the rich, but what we also have to do is look at this middle class section of the city that gets taxed as well. People are paying more in taxes right now than Trump did, and that's important to talk about and to solve. And I think this administration this administration has been reluctant, and this is where the city council, and again, I want to credit Corey and the work that he's been doing, have been trying to figure this out, but we need a willing partner, and I will be that willing partner being mayor.
Okay, thank you. When the city, the 421A, the tax abatements, very often there's priority going to people who live in the neighborhood. So in areas that are predominantly white, most city apartments go to predominantly white people, and people of color do not have the same ability to get that 20%. How would you work around that?
I think affordable housing has, and really just development in general, have to be rethought. MIH is failing us. MIH, we already knew when we were going into it that it was going to be a failure. And I'm looking at developments in my neck of the woods in Sunset Park and in Red Hook. And I have been very clear about really pushing for 100% affordable. That's the model that gets us where we need to get to. That requires a lot more investment. And a lot of that is capital and tax credits. But just look at the Fifth Avenue Committee Sunset Park Library project, look that up. That took a while to construct, and I want to do more of that. I want to figure out how we really rethink how we bring resources. Developers that want to do good in our communities can't, because they don't have the resources to make that happen. And I think that can change with a better administration and a reallocation of resources. 421A is just one piece, but there's a lot more that the city can do to really inject higher affordability, wider ranges, deeper affordability, and 100% forever. That's what I'm interested in doing. And I think that, you know, I think that there are people in the kind of billionaire class, we'll call them, that might be interested in that, but we haven't even created a space to have that conversation. This mayor set a very particular kind of standard about how he wanted to do that, executed by his administration. Everyone was there making that happen, including Alicia Glenn, and it's not working.
Okay, a question on police. Do you think that police officers should be mandated to live within the 5 boroughs?
Well, this is interesting. I feel like that's the right direction. But when you talk to advocates, I don't think that they're all on board with forcing that kind of requirement. I think that there could be percentages that we can look at, but I'm going to look to the advocates for that. I'm gonna follow their lead about what they want to do. I think there are a lot of other issues, because what that question tells you is that officers are not engaging in community the way they need to because they don't know the community. How do we solve that? There might be 4 or 5 different ways to do that. And one, we got to reduce the number of officers and increase resources in communities. 2, they need to stop cooperating with ICE. We are continuing to see misinformation right now about their engagement with ICE. We saw that during the height of the BLM Black Lives Matter protests, where precincts were inviting federal agents to protect precincts. That's the kind of stuff that will tear apart relationships forever. That's what's causing issues with census. That's what's causing issues with people connecting to COVID rapid testing. And that's real. And when we're talking about essential workers, those are immigrants that are needing to connect to all the services that we have in the city of New York.
Last question. What do you think could be done about ICE now pretending to be police officers and entrapping immigrants?
Yes. This is in so many ways a federal issue, and we have an incredible advocate in Congress, and her name is Nidia Velázquez, La Luchadora. Her congressional time has really focused on this issue. She has a bill. It's not going to go anywhere for the moment, but we need to keep talking about it. And we have the opportunity here. I was at a press conference this weekend, and what we need to do is have the commissioner himself come out. Every single time there is a discrepancy, every time we hear from a family that there might be someone that's impersonating the local NYPD, that he comes out and in the camera says, this was not us, and we do not condone this kind of relationship or thought that this could be happening every single time. And they don't do that. It's not enough, and that's the kind of stuff that erodes relationships in our communities and breaks down public safety. That is, I am incredibly committed to that. And this is why we need a new administration.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. We will be in touch, and you're welcome to stay on. We have one more candidate, and we'll talk.
I'll be here to support Maya, absolutely.
Okay. Maya, again, my apologies for the slight mix-up in time. We're all thrilled that you're here with us, and please tell us who you are, why you're running, and why you're seeking the support from the progressive community.
Well, thank you, Alan, and thank you, everyone. And let me be brief and to the point. Not only do I love this city, which I clearly do, which we all do, but I come to this because I believe this must be a city where we can all live here with dignity. And I come at that from a personal perspective. As someone who living in a Black neighborhood when I was a young child, going to the neighborhood public school and being 2 years behind grade level at the top of my class in second grade, I know what that's like. Watching my neighbors disappear because my best friend's mom, who was a cashier at the grocery store down the block, raised the rent on their home. And my best friend just wasn't there one day, Charlene. I went to law school because these and all the issues I saw in that neighborhood that was so dear to me, that I watched disappear very quickly because of displacement, because of a failure to invest in the community, was the kind of thing I went to law school for. I came back to New York, a place where I lived as a baby, because I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. And it was such an important experience to be in law school at a time when we not only had the AIDS crisis, that we not only had people being discriminated against solely because they were gay or lesbian and therefore perceived to be sick, that I was in a law school that had an AIDS discrimination law clinic. And my first case was before the City Human Rights Commission, seeing firsthand how having a city agency, not just a federal court, but a city agency with broad laws of protections, where we were cutting our teeth on my client, Joe Lariah in the Bronx, who was HIV positive, being kicked out of his home and losing his job, even though he was asymptomatic, and fighting for that and seeing how the city can fight for that. But it gave me the opportunity to spend the next 25 years of my career as a civil rights attorney, as a racial justice advocate, constantly focused on this issue of how do we dismantle broken systems? How do we dismantle what we have built that is broke? And right now, what COVID did, what George Floyd did, is it blew the curtain back on things that so many of us have known for not only our lifetimes, but our parents knew and our grandparents. which is that we have been a city that is born of a diversity that is beautiful, but not one that has always been invested in. And what that means is not just that we have to look at this crisis of COVID, look squarely in the eye, the fact that we have a deep revenue crisis, a revenue crisis of the creation, largely of failed leadership, let's be honest. And then we also have, as a result of that, the very people who have been most impacted over generations being the front line of what's been impacted in COVID, 24,000 people dead. But here's the thing, and this is why I have so much passion to step up into this as someone who has no political background. I am the unconventional candidate. I am the candidate who has never run for public office before, because I saw firsthand what I knew as an advocate, which is that city government has the power to impact people's lives directly, to do it in a way that calls us all together to a common purpose, that has the ability to ask us and to partner with one another, to get government to partner with itself, to say we have to be a city where we all, no matter how we look, no matter who we love, no matter how we worship, no matter whether we have a big bank account or no bank account at all, that this is a city we can live with dignity in. Dignity means housing we can afford. Dignity means a job that treats us fairly, that ensures we can support our families. Dignity means that we come together and recognize we have so much that so many of us can put on the table that we just need to be asked, and a leadership that calls us to that higher purpose. This is a city where we can all rise. And I'm stepping up because we need a transformational leadership that gets us off the treadmill of incrementalism.
Okay,
And that's why I'm here.
Thank you very, very much. We're now going to go to our lightning round, yes or no. Will you not seek, and if offered, refuse the endorsement of Bill de Blasio?
I will not seek.
Okay, thank you. Will you fire Police Commissioner Dermot Shea?
Yes.
Should the NYPD Vice Squad be eliminated?
Look, we have to totally reimagine and re-envision all of policing. And I want to start soup to nuts and look at the whole thing and reform the whole thing.
But the Vice Squad should go?
The Vice Squad has to be looked at and on the table with everything else, but we have to right-size policing, we have to invest in our communities, and we got to do it in a transformational way.
Okay, so you're not answering that particular question. Should the NYPD Commission require confirmation by the City Council?
You know, I want strong mayoral oversight at the front end that just says, working with the people of the city of New York and the elected leadership, what the policies and priorities of policing are. And that also includes looking at what and how we structure leadership.
Should it require the confirmation of the City Council, whoever's the police commissioner?
It requires civilian oversight, and that includes partnership with the City Council.
Okay, so I'm putting that down as a yes. Will you not interfere in the council process of picking a new speaker?
I will not.
Okay. Are you in favor of removing the statue of Christopher Columbus from Columbus Circle?
I'm in favor of looking at all of our statues and all of our icons and making sure that they represent the values and principles of our people and all our people, and doing it in an
inclusive. Not answering that question. Next question. Will you favor renaming the 59th Street Bridge due to Ed Koch's purposeful disregard of the AIDS crisis, which caused the death of untold thousands, and his blatant racism?
You know, same answer, because we have to do this collectively and together, and what Ed Koch said and did was reprehensible, and we have to acknowledge that.
Okay, no answer. Do you believe in the decriminalization of sex work?
Yes.
Would you oppose the Nordic model?
To be very honest, I'm not an expert on the Nordic model, so I'd have to look at that, but I am very much in favor of a very aggressive protection of sex workers and establishing dignity for sex workers.
Then you're probably against the Nordic model, but we'll confirm. Okay. Do you oppose the de Blasio Cuomo proposal and giveaways for bringing Amazon headquarters to Long Island City?
Look, it was clearly a bad deal because people killed it, and we need to revision exactly how we do development, do it right so that we bring dignity and people see and feel the benefits and that they're equitable benefits.
Okay. Do you support legislation to prohibit discrimination against formerly incarcerated people in housing?
Absolutely.
Are you in favor of making it mandatory that apartment buildings must allow people the right to have dogs and cats?
Well, I'm looking at one of my 4 cats, and where I go, my cats go. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Will your administration affirmatively seek to hire formerly incarcerated individuals in positions throughout the city administration?
Well, not if they committed crimes while in public office.
If they've served their time and if they are now rehabilitated.
I believe that we must create jobs for people who are formerly incarcerated, and absolutely that includes city government.
Okay, thank you. Do you support the removal of the nearly 300 homeless men from the Lucerne Hotel due to pressure from local residents who do not want to live amongst the homeless?
Absolutely not.
You played a role the last few weeks, haven't you?
Yes, and I met directly with those men, and it is wrong what is happening to them.
Okay, thank you. Will you refuse contributions from the real estate industry?
Yes.
Will you refuse contributions from all law enforcement unions or associations?
Yes.
And the last question, do you occasionally smoke weed?
I don't, but I make a mean gin and tonic.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go to the questions. And we have 1 or 2 specifically for you. And the first one is the obvious one. Hold on 1 second. Well, I don't even have to look at it. How would you, vis-a-vis your relationship with the de Blasio administration, here it is. As someone who draws many top advisors from the same de Blasio administration in which you served, how would you demonstrate to the electorate that you will not continue his failed policies?
So look, I'm a woman who stands on my own 2 feet. I have my whole life. I have a mission for this run, and it is fundamentally about transforming what is broken in the city so that we're not just recovering, we're reimagining. And everyone on my team is committed to that. And everything that we will do will be geared to putting the city of New York, not just back to where it was before, because that was broken. But I'm not a conventional politician. I'm not someone who is seeking this office because I'm seeking higher office. I'm not someone who's been making political deals or who is cut from a cloth or owned by a political machine. I come from a community. I come from a place which is fundamentally about people. And that's my highest aspiration, and those who are on my team and those with whom I will work.
How would you be able to install in people, in the population, in the citizens of New York, that you are not going to be another Bill de Blasio, being that you've been so closely identified with him? Is your answer that you're your own person?
My answer is the women are coming out from behind the men, and that's what I'm here for. One of the things I want to really do is make sure the people of New York know who I am and what my career has been. I've spent 30 years as an advocate, and I'm proud of having spent 2.5 years in City Hall in order to see and do exactly what we needed to do, which was taking women and minority business-owned contracts from 500 million to 1.6 billion the first year I ran that program, to getting every single apartment in Queensbridge houses free broadband, which was something the city had never envisioned it could do before I got there. I'm proud of those things, but I also saw exactly where and how it breaks down. And that's why I say I'm standing up as Maya Wiley and the career I've had for 30 years. But let me tell you something else we're going to do in this campaign that is so important, not just because it's a campaign, but it's because this is about putting people first. And that's people's assembly. Okay, people's assemblies, where we're calling on the people of the city of New York to participate in saying what recovers this city.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, you want to talk about and defend your role in creating the agents of the city designation. That is the other big question when your name comes up.
Well, thank you, Alan, for asking that. Let me start by saying, first and foremost, those emails should have been made public. The reporters should have never had to sue to get access to them. Here's how it works when you're one of the lawyers in government. You tell your client what the law says, you offer options, you give advice, and the client makes the decision. In this case, the mayor makes the decision. If I am mayor, I am saying to the American people, those emails that you will never have to wonder who I'm talking to, because you will know. And those emails would have been public if I was the decision maker. And as mayor, one of the things that's critically important is that we restore trust in government. We can't do that in the shadows. I won't do it. It's not who I am.
Okay, you were former chair of the CCRB, and as everybody knows, often the recommendations go nowhere. The police commissioner ignores them. Do you think that the CCRB board should have the final disciplinary authority to terminate or demote officers?
You know, we got to put the public back in public safety. And that means, one, my experience at the CCRB, it's critically important. I'm proud of the fact that we actually sent Daniel Pantaleo's case to the department with the recommendation of charges that put it on track to get him off the force after killing Eric Garner. Here is the thing. I really believe that we must shift this conversation also to putting the public back at the front end before anyone is harmed, before anyone is killed. And that means the civilian oversight of the policies and priorities of policing. That's something a mayor must do. Say what the rules of the road are and what cannot be tolerated, and make sure there's discipline early, and that what's right is clear and what's wrong is clear, because we should also be trying to bring down the number of cases we have in the first place. But absolutely, we need strong civilian oversight and to ensure that there's clear accountability and fairness in terms of how those decisions are made.
Okay, and while we have you and Carlos on, I do want to recognize that both of you signed the letter to the governor requesting that he release the elderly from prison. 6 of the 7 candidates did it, and we're very proud of all of you.
Thank you for doing that letter.
Next question. There's been a proposal by one of your opponents who is a recently registered Democrat that all participants in demonstrations and protests have to individually register with the city in order to protest. In addition, the candidate maintains that you must have a permit to protest. I don't know how you would handle that in a spontaneous demonstration that happens throughout New York historically. And then there are organizations like the Dyke March, which hasn't requested a permit, and they've been marching since 1993 and have survived 3 mayoral administrations. Would you demand that individuals have to sign up to participate? Would you demand that there be a registration for any kind of massive demonstration or protest? And would you cancel demonstrations that have transpired in the past if they don't have a permit?
Look, absolutely not. Like, I grew up at the feet of people who were protesting and being arrested for the fact that they were using their voice to demand justice. I marched with protesters after the horrific killing of George Floyd, which was just one of far too many. There's going to be another rally for Breonna Taylor here in New York on Saturday. I plan to be at that one. The idea that we would try to scare people from using their constitutional rights of free speech and freedom of assembly, no, no, no.
Okay, thank you very much. The issue of small businesses, the issue of tens of thousands of people being evicted. How would you address those two issues as mayor of the city?
You know, first of all, let's just recognize 98% of our businesses in the city are small businesses. They are the backbones of our communities. They represent so much of what makes New York a city we all want to live in, because they're a big part of our communities, as well as feeding people, putting food on the table, and creating jobs. So the first thing that we must do is ensure that we're looking at every regulation and creating every opportunity to rethink how businesses can operate, small businesses in particular, and how we can better support them with commercially affordable rent. You know, one of the things that we have not done as a city that we should is talk about the affordability for entrepreneurship, because rents, commercial rents, are a huge part. Even in this crisis, as I was volunteering to try to help some of our neighborhood small businesses, the bailouts were not sufficient to cover the commercial rent, and they were struggling to pay it even beforehand. So that's something that the city can look at, and take advantage also of some of our vacancy rates to think about how that can turn into creating more opportunities for small businesses. On evictions, look, 400,000 people are at risk of losing their homes by the end of this year. And when we think about the homeless crisis we've had in this city, a big chunk of that, particularly for families, is it's an eviction crisis. So we have to look at and leverage both the vacancies and the opportunity that those vacancies create, as well as all the dollars that the city currently has available to deploy to housing. We never should have cut, by the way, our capital construction budget for affordable housing, but looking at those assets, those resources, to make sure that people stay in their homes. Because as we know, as prices come down, as the New York Times itself reported, affordability is also a growth strategy, because we've seen people moving into the city when it becomes more affordable. We have to make sure the people who are also here can afford to stay.
Okay, and the issue of taxing the rich, increasing the taxes.
All hands on deck. You know, everybody in the city has something to contribute. I've talked to a number of people who are wealthy who absolutely recognize that they love this city and that they have the ability to pay more, and also recognize that every single person in the city is a person of value and has something to bring to the table, even when it's not money, because we have so many communities that have done so much with so little for so long. But what we need is leadership with vision that paints the picture of what and how those resources not just recover us back to a city that was broken for too many before, but holds on to the diversity that we love, holds on to the creativity and the fact that we should be a place where artists can afford to live, holds on to the fact that 40% of our people are foreign born, and that's what makes us great. And do it in a way that also says, yes, this is a road that we're all on together. We're going to build it together, and it has to include all of us.
Okay, would you have a plan on how to save nightlife, which is drowning?
Yeah, nightlife is, look, first of all, we're going to have a vaccine at some point. We won't trust Donald Trump to tell us whether it's safe, but we will have one, and we will have some people we will trust to tell us it's safe. We will be able to bring nightlife back. One of the things we must do is recognize, it's part of our vibrancy. It's part of what we love. It's also part of what creates jobs for us. It's part of what brings tourism to our city. It's part of what gets our hotels filled. A lot of our essential workers who are out of work are people who have lost jobs because they've been thrown out of good union hotel jobs that help them feed their families. So we need to bring that back. And that means thinking very, very seriously about, yes, how to do it safely and when and how is appropriate, but how to do it in a way that recognizes it's a vibrant part of who we are. One other thing we have to do, though, and acknowledge that some of the NIMBYism, as we are a diverse city, but when we want to have hip hop night, we should be able to have hip hop night. When we have gay pride, you know, we need to be able to celebrate. And so we have to have real conversations about balancing, of course, the interests of people to have some quiet at certain points, but also balancing that this is part of our vibrancy, our culture, and our cultural expression, and we need to be able to have that.
Thank you. If elected mayor, will you be visiting your constituents who happen to be in places like Bedford Correctional Facility and other, to see how they're doing and what kind of services they're getting?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. You know, one of the things that I had that the council's unit, I had a unit of 13 staff, and we insisted that we go to Rikers, for example, and do a tour for ourselves. Nobody asked us to do that. We thought it was the right thing to do, because if we were in a position where, you know, if you're making decisions that impact people's lives, you have to know and talk to who those people are. You have to see the conditions. You have to know them. And you have to recognize and engage everyone in the conversation to understand exactly how city government can and must be better and do better.
Okay, thank you. The Bronx, we'll just have one or two other questions. The poorest urban congressional district in America is in the Bronx. And that's one of the worst health, has one of the worst health catastrophes in the city, in the country. What would you do specifically to make the health crisis in the Bronx less dramatic and create so that the 5 boroughs are more equitable as far as how their residents are treated?
Yeah, this is critically important. We can't be a city that responds to community based on how many people vote. We have to be a city that responds to communities of concern, meaning people who have needs that we must fill. And for far too long, the Bronx has been ignored. The people of the Bronx. I have 2 godsons that lived in the Bronx, one in public housing. And I can tell you right now that we need and must focus on 3 things. 1, we have to save the hospitals, our independent hospitals, that are the backbone for so many communities for health services who don't have health insurance or can't afford to pay. 2, we have to save our community health clinics, because that is a place where folks can get primary care and often get the kind of care that otherwise they can't afford to pay out of pocket, and it's good care. But 3rd, this is a city with 600,000 people who are uninsured. 600,000. Some of that is because they're undocumented. That shouldn't be the case. They still deserve insurance. Some of that, though, is because they have papers, but they may even be citizens with passports who were born here, but they are either in cash businesses or in jobs that fall through the cracks and don't have benefits. Here's the thing. The city has the ability to think about how it brings its tremendous bargaining power to create an insurance pool for the 600,000 who don't have insurance. That's the kind of thinking I'm going to bring to City Hall, because that's the kind of thinking the people of the South Bronx and all over the Bronx need, but also all over the city in so many communities of concern that haven't gotten the attention that they absolutely deserve.
Okay, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We thank all the candidates who have been with us. We thank everybody that joined us. And I just want to say, if you're interested in the work of the Jim Arrow's Liberal Democratic Club, we have 100 people on our Board of Governors, and we have our officers. We're an LGBTQ club, and required that 51% of our members be members of the LGBTQ community. We formed because we felt that the LGBT community needed a progressive club, a Democratic club, to represent the 5 boroughs. We try to be out there. We try to be really progressive, and we care about all the issues. And we have people on our board who represent the spectrum of communities that are disenfranchised, and we should be working for. So let us know if you're interested in what we're doing. Tonight's casting will be, the link will be on our website, so you can listen to it and you can send it to other people. And we will be making our endorsement sometime in December. And we'll be hosting other forums and other races within the next few weeks. So thank you, everybody. And remember, we have a lot of work to do to get that racist out of the White House. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Buenas noches.
Still on, I think.